Good morning. It is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
President Trump pauses the US operation to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz after he says great progress has been made on a deal with Iran.
Deserted decks and PPE-clad medical workers inside the Antivirus-stricken cruise ship now heading for the Canary Islands.
The Metropolitan Police announces 100 new officers to protect Jewish communities after a rise in anti-Semitic attacks.
Also ahead, it's the last day before elections in Scotland, England and Wales. We'll have all the information you need before going to the polls.
And good news for Wilf, Bukayo Saka fires Arsenal into the Champions League final for the first time in 20 years.
Discuss the sport a little bit later on. But first, welcome to the programme and let's get to some breaking news. In a surprise move overnight, President Trump announced he's pausing efforts to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, so-called Project Freedom, in order to move forward with making a deal with Iran.
So it comes just 3 days after announcing the initiative, which saw US vessels guide commercial ships out of the waterway, and only hours after his own cabinet secretaries talked up the mission. President Trump said, however, that great progress had been made on a deal. Our US correspondent David Blevins is in Washington.
This really is an extraordinary decision by President Trump. In his post on Truth Social, he's celebrating America's military success and what he calls the great progress they've made towards a deal with Iran. But make no mistake about it, he's pressing pause on his flagship project to reopen the Strait of Hormuz on the very day when he urged Iran to throw in the towel.
They should wave. They're very proud. Maybe you won't see a white flag, but essentially, that's already what they need. They should wave the white flag of surrender.
And this may have taken Donald Trump's own cabinet by surprise, because it came just hours after two of them, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the man who calls himself Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, both boasted that they had shifted their focus from the war to securing the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, as you know, President Trump has directed U.S. Central Command to restart the free flow of commerce through the Strait of Hormuz under the umbrella of Project Freedom.
The operation is over. Epic Fury, as the president notified Congress, we're done with that stage of it. Okay, we're now on to this Project of Freedom.
That's two cabinet secretaries talking up Project Freedom, which the president is now winding down while he attempts to strike a deal with Iran. No ships in, no ships out, the US blockade firmly in place, and much of the world's oil supply with nowhere to go. So where will this president go next? Can he find a way out of this war that many feel America should never have got involved in?
David Blevins there for us. Let's just bring you up to speed on that post from President Trump overnight. He said, based on the requests of Pakistan and other countries, the tremendous military success that we've had during the campaign against the country of Iran, and additionally the fact that great progress has been made towards a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran, we have mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force and effect, Project Freedom, the movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not the agreement can be finalised and signed.
Well, let's get more on this, shall we now, with Sally Lockwood, who's in Dubai for us. Sally, does this mean we should be optimistic about the state of a deal?
It's really hard to know at the moment, isn't it? I mean, look at Project Freedom. It's lasted around 2 days, and in that time, it looks like they've managed to transport just 2 civilian vessels safely through the Strait of Hormuz, despite the immense military might that the US threw at it. So yes, Project Freedom is paused, but it's been a failure by all accounts so far, and it's been pretty embarrassing for Donald Trump. His latest push to try and reopen the Strait of Hormuz has not worked. So what now? Well, what does this mean for the ceasefire? That's also the other big concern, is that Project Freedom has been the biggest threat to this ceasefire unravelling altogether that we've seen in the last 4 weeks of relative calm. The UAE attacked for a second day yesterday. The Ministry of Defence confirming that drones and missiles were fired at the UAE from Iran once again. No damage or injuries that we're aware of, unlike Monday, where Iran managed to strike a major oil facility, injuring 3 Indian citizens who were then treated in hospital. Iran has not acknowledged that they were behind these attacks in the last 2 days. Why? Well, they want to publicly deny that they carried out these attacks because for the same reason as the US don't want to acknowledge that this ceasefire is in danger of collapse, it does threaten escalation and a wider war. But certainly the rhetoric towards the UAE from Iran is hardening. They've threatened the UAE in a tweet from the Iranian military that if the UAE was to take any action against Iranian islands or ports, then the response from Iran would be severe and crushing. They've named the UAE a couple of times now in the last 24 to 48 hours, warning them along with the US about getting involved in any sort of action again. Despite the UAE not being involved in any offensive operations, it does seem that Iran is seeing any potential support that is being offered for the US efforts in the Strait of Hormuz as in some way complicit. We'll have to wait and see what happens in the next 24 hours. Will a pause on Project Freedom mean a pause on the attacks on the UAE? We don't know yet, but this is already having a very, very real impact on people's lives. Of course, the wider issue when it comes to the global economy, but on a domestic level here, schools have closed now until the end of the week. There's been travel disruption. A lot of people are concerned that we're going to see another round of the weeks of daily attacks that we saw before. But one glimmer of hope is that the Iranian foreign minister is meeting his Chinese counterpart in Beijing today, and certainly even Secretary of State Marco Rubio has pinned some hopes on some sort of a breakthrough from these bilateral talks, because China is one of the most exposed major economies to the issue when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. Around half of their imported crude oil comes from the Strait of Hormuz. So could China make a difference here? Well, it's not looking like Iran is willing to give up its biggest leverage when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, certainly while the US blockade on their vessels remains in place. So we'll have to wait and see. It remains at deadlock, but certainly the coming hours will determine a lot in terms of whether we're going to see any more attacks on the UAE.
Sally, great stuff. Thanks so much. And unsurprisingly, oil prices have eased off the back of this, albeit not that significantly, down another couple of percent today. We're down a couple of percent yesterday, so we're currently 108 for Brent, but still well above 100, well above the 60 where we $60 a barrel where we started the year. And it's worth just mentioning as well, we're going to talk about this more at 7:30 with Simon French, but borrowing costs in the UK surged yesterday. The 30-year borrowing cost hit a high not seen since 1998. Actually, oddly, whilst most other nations weren't seeing borrowing costs rise, pointing to the fact that it was more of a political pressure factor, not the war. But either way, today you'll probably see some reprieve in British borrowing costs off the back of the easing oil price.
Fingers crossed. We want to update you on the cruise ship, which people have been stuck on, of course, after this outbreak of Antivirus. Spain has offered a lifeline to this Dutch cruise ship now. They've announced that it will now sail to the Canary Islands and it will get there within 3 to 4 days. So currently there are 7 confirmed or suspected cases of Antivirus. Take a look at some of these pictures from on board where you can see the deserted decks and medical teams in protective gear, which is a fairly triggering image, of course, post-pandemic. 3 people have died so far, while several sick patients on board are being evacuated to Cape Verde before it leaves for urgent medical help. The ship's called the MV Hondius. It's been anchored off the coast in the Atlantic there. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has this report.
It's sold as an Antarctic Odyssey, a spectacular 42-night cruise from the Antarctic Circle, crossing the equator to the coast of West Africa. A once-in-a-lifetime dream.
For going in the ice and spotting wildlife like whales, this is the perfect ship.
The ship's chef posted this picture on the night before they set sail. But Kabir Moraes, on the bottom right, and his shipmates on board the MV Hondias did not know that their dream would turn into a nightmare. Just 10 days into their cruise, a passenger died, others fell critically ill, and the ship is now at the centre of a suspected Antivirus outbreak. The MV Hondias set sail on the cruise, which cost anywhere between £6,000 and £18,000 on the 1st of April, from Argentina. It made its way through the southern Atlantic Ocean on its way to Cape Verde on the 3rd of May, and that's where it remains.
The plan now is for the ship to continue on to the Canary Islands. We're working with Spanish authorities who will welcome the ship, have said that they will welcome the ship, to do a full investigation, a full epidemiologic investigation, full disinfection of the ship, and of course to assess the risk of the passengers that are actually on board.
Antivirus is spread through rodent droppings, urine or saliva. The virus particles, once dried out, can be breathed in. Early symptoms are like flu, but can turn into a deadly infection of the lungs or kidneys. Human-to-human transmission is extremely rare, but WHO experts think that this may be happening on board the Hondias. So far, 3 passengers have died, a German traveller and a Dutch couple, whose family paid this tribute. The beautiful journey they experienced together was abruptly and permanently cut short. We are still unable to comprehend that we have lost them. We wish to bring them home and commemorate them in peace and privacy. The ordeal for the passengers and crew of the MV Hondias is not yet over. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
We're talking to someone from South Africa later who's an expert in these diseases. Of course, South Africa have been very relevant in this story.
Well, let's talk now, shall we, about the rise in anti-Semitic attacks that we've seen in recent months. The Met Police have announced 100 police officers are now going to be allocated to a new dedicated community protection team to help specifically protect the Jewish community.
Well, the new team will provide a mixture of neighbourhood policing, specialist protection and counter-terrorism capabilities. Let's bring in our correspondent, Graham, on this. Graham, what is this latest development and when do we expect it to be formalised or not?
So if you remember, in the immediate aftermath of the Golders Green incident, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, said that 300 extra officers would be needed to combat the rising tide of anti-Semitism. So what they're saying is that this first 100 is the first phase of that, focused primarily on protecting the Jewish community. So after an uplift, as you say, in the number of attacks allegedly targeting that community, and again, in recent days, we've actually seen more incidents. A suspected arson attack at a former synagogue on Tuesday, rocks thrown at a Jewish community ambulance at the weekend. And in the past 4 weeks alone, the Met has arrested around 50 people for anti-Semitic hate crimes. The chief prosecutor for England and Wales has also said that the prosecution for such crimes needs to be fast-tracked. Here's what he said when he spoke to Sky News.
We don't have that, sadly,
OK.
Graham. But in terms of the sort of extent to which we think things will change in the short term, what are we hearing?
Well, my understanding is that the money is coming from, if you remember again, £25 million was pledged in one-off funding to support protective policing. £18 million worth of that is going being specifically ring-fenced for the Metropolitan Police. So Mark Rowley has said that that's a really good thing, but actually it needs to be addressed in a more long-term solution kind of way. The government, we also understand, is actually set to introduce new legislation which would see people convicted of anti-Semitic attacks orchestrated from Tehran face up to 14 years in prison. That's after allegations that Iranian actors were stirring up hatred, which in part could be to blame for the rise in anti-Semitic incidents. Now, that could you could potentially face up to 14 years in prison, even if you didn't know that you were acting on the behalf of Iran or Iranian agents or the IRGC. Again, set to, we understand, become a proscribed organisation. All of these moving parts, obviously, in the wake of this rise in anti-Semitic attacks that we've seen.
Graham, good stuff. Thank you. Well, yesterday, the Prime Minister met with several leaders to talk about how to tackle anti-Semitism, and we're going to be joined by one of them in the programme a little bit later, the President of the Union of Jewish Students, Louis Danker. He'll be joining us at 9:15.
Now, today is the final day of campaigning before voters head to the polls for the English local council elections and the devolved parliamentary elections in Wales and Scotland. Very pleased to say that Lucy McDade joins us now to discuss all of this. So, campaigning revving up. It's going to be an absolutely box office set of elections, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure as political journalists we say that every time there's a set of local elections, don't we? But no, really, this one is going to be box office. For so many different reasons. There are so many stories that will come out of this. So from a Westminster perspective, when you talk to Labour MPs, this local elections is a bit of a referendum on Keir Starmer and whether or not he can lead the party into the next election. You've also really got a referendum on the two-party political system. We've seen it already break down in previous elections, the general election and also locals last year. But this is a big set, more than 5,000 council seats. Labour and the Conservatives are going in with the most to lose. Labour, more than 2,500 seats. They could lose 1,500, 2,000. I mean, that would be, some Labour MPs say, would be pretty terminal for Keir Starmer. The Greens and Reform look set to be the biggest winners. So you're going to see the further fragmentation of our political system. Wales and Scotland, let's not forget, I think those are the two kind of most crucial sets, potentially seeing these nationalist pro-independence parties winning. I mean, what does that mean for the rest of the UK? Those are the big questions that we're going into Thursday with.
In terms of the kind of final pitches that we've been seeing, is it very local driven, or is it the party leaders and who's been out and about sort of most aggressively?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because actually I think sometimes we forget local elections are people voting for the people who make decisions on their bin collections, social care, transport. But actually you've got, so Reform, for example, Nigel Farage's big message for this set of elections is get Starmer out, which isn't very local. It's a national message, isn't it? It's about the Prime Minister. The Greens, for example, they're saying let's make hope normal again. So again, I mean, in their campaigning, and other parties too are talking about housing, they are talking about local issues. But let's be honest, it's really hard. And when you speak to voters, Sophie, you did earlier this week, it's hard to see how people aren't going into Thursday thinking about the cost of living, aren't thinking about Donald Trump, the war in Iran, how it's affecting them. It's hard to pull apart local and national from these elections, I think.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Lucy, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Awful lot, of course, to come with our coverage of those elections, the local elections in England and those parliamentary elections in Scotland and Wales as well. Well, pleased to say that we're joined now by the Work and Pension Secretary, Pat McFadden. Great to have you. Thank you for being with us today. Before we get to a whole host of issues that we're going to talk about, I just want to start on Iran, if I may. President Trump has said that Operation Fury, the offensive stage in Iran, is over. He's been kind of talking up the peace talks. Are you optimistic that this might come to an end anytime soon?
Well, I hope it will, but to be honest, I'm not sure statements have made a massive amount of difference in the last few weeks, so I think we have to see what happens in terms of actions. I mean, Pakistan is trying to play a positive role as a broker, and credit to them for doing that. But I think we've probably learned in the last few weeks that to comment on every twist and turn and social media post might not get us very far.
Yeah, it's a very fair observation, I think it's fair to say. One of the things that I think a lot of people will be worried about in relation to Iran is holidays and jet fuel in particular. And Goldman Sachs has said that the UK is most exposed to jet fuel shortages, vulnerable to rationing, and that's because the UK is the largest net importer of jet fuel in Europe and it holds no strategic reserves. How long are our jet fuel supplies going to last?
Well, we're obviously in a lot of dialogue with the airline companies. They are used to planning forward, buying forward and planning ahead. So they, do have plans in place. They plan these things a few months ahead. So I think we're as well placed as we can be, and the Transport Secretary's ready to do whatever she needs to in terms of some of the rules that apply on slots and flights and so on. Obviously, we want people to have their summer holiday, and we'll do everything we can with the airline companies to make sure that happens. But it's an interesting point because it shows that even though we've not taken part in this war, the reverberations of it are going to be felt all around the world. That's true here in terms of prices, possibly the labour market too, and things like jet fuel supplies. We'll do everything we can, but we haven't chosen to take part in the war, but its effects will come here and are coming here. I
mean, in mid-April, the head of the International Energy Agency said Europe had 6 weeks of jet fuel left. I mean, that was 3 weeks ago. It's getting a bit close to...
Sure, but, you know, the Middle East is a very important source of jet fuel, but it's not the only one. Our airlines are trying to buy around the world. They are very experienced in doing this, so they'll do everything they can.
I mean, Keir Starmer said people might need to rethink their summer holidays. Could we see a sort of surge in staycations? Maybe that'd be a good thing for the economy.
You know, let's see what happens. I hope that people are able to go on the holiday they want to go to. Britain's a great place to go on a holiday. You know, I plan to spend a few days in the Lake District, but I want people to have the choice.
OK. You mentioned there the impact on the labour market. I just wondered if you could unpick that a little bit. Are we worried about that?
Well, at the beginning of the year, the economy was going in the right direction. We had stronger growth than we expected. The latest unemployment figures for February showed a fall. Interest rates were expected to come down, and the markets were pricing in a couple of cuts during the course of the year. The truth is, with the effect of the Iran war, we can't count on any of that at the moment. There is likely to be an effect on prices, which feeds through from energy costs, and there may well be labour market implications.
Job losses, yes. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it could happen.
Have you got projections on that?
Well, the market projections for unemployment for the rest of the year have been revised upwards as a direct result of the Iran war. What we've been putting in place are policies to try to help business with the cost of hiring people. So I've, for example, announced a hiring incentive of £3,000 for a business that will take on a young unemployed person who's been out of work for 6 months. We are tilting the funding for apprenticeships more towards youth starts. We were going to do that, but these policies are even more timely now because of the Iran war.
OK. There are reports of new legislation in the King's Speech that would mean people carrying out hate crimes, anti-Semitic attacks, for example, orchestrated by Iranian proxies would face 14 years in prison. Is that, can you confirm those?
Well, there will be new legislation in the King's Speech about the protection of the public, and the issue that we're really trying to deal with here is state-backed actions, where sometimes states have hired basically criminals or people willing to do this, offering payments for attacks. The threat evolves, and so the legislation must evolve too.
So it's right that you could face 14 years in jail?
Well, I don't want to comment on the detail of the legislation, but what I would confirm is we will be bringing forward legislation which deals with this issue of states hiring proxies to do their bidding.
Are you going to prescribe the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organisation?
Equally, the Prime Minister spoke to the Jewish Chronicle a few days ago and said there would be legislation coming forward in the coming weeks, which will give new powers to ban organisations. So that's also likely. But, you know, let's wait and see exactly what's in the King's Speech.
So 24 hours until the elections. Yesterday on this programme, Anas Sarwar, the leader of the Scottish Labour Party, told me that he stands by what he says in February, that Keir Starmer needs to go, that he needs to quit. And he also said that a vote for Scottish Labour isn't an endorsement of Keir Starmer. What's your response to that?
Well, two responses. First of all, I want to wish Anas Sarwar all the best for the election tomorrow. I hope he, not at all, not through gritted teeth. I hope he's the First Minister. I think Anas Sarwar is a great leader of the Scottish Labour Party, and I wish every success to my Scottish Labour colleagues tomorrow. But on the question of the Prime Minister, I have to differ with him. I think this country has tested to destruction the idea that the answer to our problems is to swipe left on our Prime Ministers. We've seen too much of that in the past 10 to 15 years. It hasn't solved our problems. It has added to political chaos and uncertainty. That has economic as well as political consequences, and I don't think that's the answer to the situation that we're in at the moment.
What does it say, though, that the leader of the Scottish party doesn't think Keir Starmer should be Prime Minister anymore?
Well,
that is damning.
People have their views. I differ with Anas, who I like and respect, and as I say, wish every success to tomorrow. But I don't believe that constantly changing our Prime Ministers is the answer to our problems. And it's not like we haven't tried. I mean, how many have we had over the past decade? It hasn't worked. Even John Major the other day said, we've got to stop doing this.
People have their views. But this isn't just a random guy in the pub. This is the guy leading the Scottish Labour Party.
His views are not a secret. He held a press conference saying this about 2 or 3 months ago. I didn't share that view then, and I don't share it today. The Prime Minister was elected for a 5-year term, and he should serve out that term. His job is to lead the country through uncertain times, and that's the job I know he wakes up in the morning and wants to do.
How's he feeling at the minute? Is he feeling like, like he's going to face down any challenge?
Yes, he is feeling that. He's remarkably resolute, and he knows that to turn inward at this moment or to turn inward after Thursday would be a mistake. He said he put the country first when he fought the election a couple of years ago, and he will continue to put the country first.
So if there's any challenge after Thursday, he'll fight it. That's the message.
Yes, and I hope there isn't, because I don't think it would be the answer to our problems. And we'd be saying to the public, just hold on for a few months while we go over here and sort something out. That is not what the public wants to hear. I hope we do well tomorrow, but even if we don't, the day after, our job is to wake up, continue with doing our job and serve the country.
Just final question. Will the Prime Minister sack people or rule people out of jobs if they back the wrong horse, as the Spectator put it? If they don't back him, will he sack them?
I hope none of this happens, because I want to see him continue doing the job.
OK, thank you
very much
indeed. Pat McFadden speaking to us then.
We've got lots more to come on the programme. Coming up at 8:30, very excited, we'll be joined by the famed tech journalist Kara Swisher. We'll be talking about the ongoing battle between Elon Musk and Sam Altman over OpenAI, and very much more. That is at 8:30. We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll be talking about UK borrowing costs hitting a high seen not since 1998 with Simon French. That's next.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
But I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yelda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. With all the attention on the economic impact of the conflict in the Middle East, one of the things we're seeing as a knock-on effect in the UK is a spike in borrowing costs. Long-term borrowing costs, the 30-year bond yield, hit its highest level since 1998 yesterday. That might sound technical, but it matters. It's putting an increasing strain on the public finances and will have knock-on effects for people's mortgages. Joining me to discuss all this now is the chief economist at Panmure Liberum, Simon French. Simon, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Rob.
It's quite a striking statistic, that, to say, you know, the highest level since 1998. How damaging is it if we persist with these levels and this direction of travel for UK borrowing costs?
It is damaging for the public finances, first order, because the Chancellor back in the spring left herself just over £20 billion worth of financial headroom versus her self-imposed fiscal rules. That has probably been eroded by about half as a direct result of just those moves in interest rates. But you also mentioned in your introduction that there's a pass-through from that risk-free rate, what we call the sort of the sovereign rate, through to the household rate, the cost of mortgages and for households. So at a time when energy bills are going up, we're expecting food bills to go up. Is there a possibility, is there a probability actually now, even if the Bank of England doesn't change its headline interest rate, the deals offered by retail banks are going to become more expensive? Yes, there is.
Yesterday itself, whilst clearly one day is quite hard to analyse, was interesting because the UK borrowing rate jumped again quite significantly. Most of the rest of the G7 moved in the other direction yesterday because there was slightly easing oil prices yesterday. Does that suggest there's quite a lot of political factors that are driving the cost of borrowing in the UK? And what do you make of that?
I think double jeopardy here for institutional investors looking at which government debt they want to own. And most institutional investors around the world, they have choices. They can own it in US government debt or Eurozone government debt, Japanese government debt or UK government debt. And that double jeopardy is not just the fact that all borrowing costs for all governments are going up. Yes, day to day, those movements can be asymmetric. But that has been a response to events in the Gulf. There is a second impulse, and your previous interview with Pat McFadden obviously focused on this, is there's political risk here in the UK that we get a change of government or at least a leadership challenge. Now, how do people lending to the UK government try and price that? Well, they say, well, it possibly would be a move politically and economically to the left. That is more debt being issued, that is potentially higher inflation, and you just price that in how you price government debt in different countries. In the UK, you layer on potentially higher issuance, higher inflation later in the year because of political change.
Does the war, if we take the political risk out, does the war affect us more than most? Does it affect UK government finances more than most?
Again, speaking to international investors, and I think we heard from Goldman Sachs in the last 24 hours talking about the UK being the most exposed to that disruption of energy markets. Yes, I mean, unfortunately, over the last 22 years, the UK has gone from having energy costs, industrial electricity, at the same price as the rest of the IEA, a benchmark group of countries, to about twice that level, 4 times the level in the United States. That becomes really quite difficult to withstand economically. So yes, an outsized impact on what is already a very expensive energy market.
We saw some talk from Andy Burnham of late, who's obviously a potential leadership successor to Keir Starmer if there's a challenge, to say that defence spending does need to go up. It's so important we should take it out of the fiscal rules. Is that something that would make a difference? Or do people step back and say, if it's an increase in spending, however, whatever category you put it into, it's an increase in spending?
borrowing is borrowing, however you classify it. Yes, you can try and be cute with the accountancy treatment of it, but if you have to fund it through additional issuance of debt, then international investors will not make a distinction on how, for example, the Office for National Statistics might classify it. I think there might be some nuance to what Andy Burnham and others, it's not just Andy, there have been people also in the private sector writing about this. Is there a way that the UK government could have a lower interest rate on its borrowing by changing some of the tax rules about lending to the UK government? An example would be on inheritance tax. If you made the issuance of that debt to fund defence spending exempt from inheritance tax, then those people who are doing tax planning for their retirement and for their inheritance might find that quite attractive and therefore be prepared to lend to the government at a lower interest rate. That may be what Andy Burnham is talking about. If so, there may be some legs to this. But if he's just going to say, look, we'll classify it differently and expect the international bond market to be hoodwinked, I'm afraid he's in for a painful reckoning.
Clearly, we can't put the Iran war to one side. It is a very clear and present danger in terms of our borrowing costs. But if we were able to do that, and if the government were to say, look, it takes time to make changes. We're only, a couple of years into 5, and some of the changes we've already made haven't taken effect yet, and they pointed to the planning changes. Is that something you would say, this is going to really help the economy, it's going to help things like inflation and borrowing costs, or is it marginal?
Yes, but you don't start with a blank canvas on planning reform. Again, investors looking at this going, will inflation be a bit lower because this will bring down housing costs because more building and housing? Possibly, but we have seen over decades, let's be honest, UK governments of all colours, and this is a bipartisan comment, all colours promise planning reform, and then when the political reality of it emerges, when marginal constituencies, and maybe we'll find this in the local elections, when they say, what do we want? They don't want planning in, or they don't want development in their local area, and governments tend to have cold feet. So I think the market is sceptical as to whether that, which you rightly identify is a positive development, will actually ever see the light of day.
And final question, Simon, sum it all up for us. I mean, I know so much does rest on how long the war continues, and we can all hope that it ends soon. Do you expect the UK to have a recession or not?
No. I think the generally accepted definition of 2 successive quarters of negative growth. It's quite difficult to see, certainly this year, but I think you perhaps answered your own question. If it goes on much longer, then that judgment changes. As we stand here now, there's probably just enough momentum, just enough spending in the economy to avoid those 2 negative quarters.
How many more weeks of oil prices, Brent, above $100 is the swing factor for you?
So I think once you start to get into the second half of the year, so we're talking, after June, you're going to get into July, we're still talking about real constraints, real fears over supply, heading into the refilling period of supplies and heading to the European winter, then I think that becomes a much more difficult situation to navigate economically.
Simon French, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Well, it really feels, doesn't it, like some of those things outlined in Will's interview just there are exactly what politicians of all stripes are grappling with at the moment, particularly, of course, ahead of those all-important elections that are going to take place tomorrow. I'm pleased to say that Richard Holden, the Shadow Transport Secretary, joins us now. Great to have you.
Morning, Sue.
I just want to start off with your Shadow Transport hat on, actually. There's an awful lot of warnings about jet fuel going around at the minute. 3 weeks ago, the kind of head of the Energy Security Agency said that they only had 6 weeks of jet fuel supplies left in Europe. I mean, we must be halfway through those.
Yes, it is a real concern for people. Obviously, there's always topping up coming through, but you're absolutely right that people are very concerned about this, particularly the impact it's going to have on everything from business travel to family holidays. It's a very, very serious situation. The airline industry have asked for a few things of the government, including getting rid of the emissions trading scheme, something which is only just being introduced, which we voted against consistently in Parliament, adds extra costs onto the airlines, and also more flexibility in the sorts of fuels that can be used, purchased internationally and things like that. And we think the government should be open at that, because the crucial thing is to keep the economy moving, keep families being able to get on holiday and keep business moving across the world as well, especially at this moment in time.
It's a good idea for, people to look at staycations. That might help the UK economy.
I'm all in favour of staycations, spend time with mum and dad as well. Why not, throw that in as well. I think those are all important side issues, and some of those are sort of important immediate issues. But I think we also need to look at the longer-term issue, which is around our energy security. We need to look at the fact that we've lost a third of our refineries over the last 18 months or so. We've got to get drilling back in the North Sea as well, because that's how we can actually ensure we've got that longer-term jet fuel and also other fuels here in the UK.
Talk about helping the airline industry. Michael O'Leary, the head of Ryanair, has called for a ban on the 6 a.m. pint. Yes,
I saw that as well. I don't think that all of his customers would be necessarily supportive of that. I think, obviously, on a serious note, nobody should be travelling when they're absolutely inebriated. And, Ryanair have a responsibility to the rest of the passengers on those flights to make sure that people who are inebriated don't get on those flights.
Are you a fan of an airport pint yourself?
But I think there is something, peculiarly British about the tradition of having a pint at sort of 6 a.m. when you're waiting for your Ryanair flight. And I think banning that is not necessarily the right answer. It sounds slightly draconian. And also, I mean, what about all those tiny little airports that Ryanair flies to across Europe, which don't have all of those bars and other things? I think this is an attempt to grab headlines rather than deal with a serious problem.
24 hours until the election.
Yeah.
Is one of the big stories that's going to come out this week is just how much reform has decimated the Conservative vote in the last 4 years?
Look, I think it's going to be a challenging set of elections. I think the truth is, over the last 4 years versus 5 years, because these elections are some from 2021, some from 2022. So I think there is a difference, and you'll see a marked difference on the night between those elections. For example, some of the county council elections, which were delayed from last year, I think those elections happened in 2021 at a real high point under the Boris Johnson government. I think some of the other elections, like the 2022 local elections, for example, the London boroughs, I think there might be you might see a difference between those two, where I think there is a potential, I think, for some areas to see Conservatives gaining seats as well.
What's a good night for you?
Well, I think I think what we saw last year was, a really tough set of results. But I think overall we could see. What I want to see is things getting better than they were.
I'll tell you what
and I think that's what I want to see.
Rallings and Thrasher are saying a good night for you would be losing 400 seats.
Yeah.
I mean, show me a bad night. That sounds like
no. I think you're coming. As I said, a lot of these election results are from 2021, real high point local elections. That was the elections, if you remember, in which Labour lost Hartlepool to the Conservatives after Boris had got that massive majority in the 2019 general election. So they were a really specific high point election results. I think what we want to do is see us turning a corner. We've been in some parts of the country. You look down at Kent, for example, last year. We got absolutely hammered down there, down to low single-figure seats. If that election had happened in Essex and was reflected in Essex this year, we would have probably 0 county councillors. Right? I think that we should be able to be doing slightly better than that. I'm not saying we're going to be holding some of these councils, but I think we can do better than we would have done this time last year. Because I think what people have started to do is take notice of Kemi. I had her in my constituency twice over the last fortnight. I think they're liking what they see from her. That grit, that determination, that clarity of thought, that clarity of purpose. She wants to get things changed, she wants to get things done, she wants to get the economy moving, but she's also on those other issues of the day, like dealing with anti-Semitism, she's also very, very clear on those issues, which is, I think, something she can be given credit for, where the party hasn't been as clear as it could have been in the past.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Richard Holden, speaking to us there from the Conservative Party.
Well, after 8 this morning, we will be discussing the local elections with the pollster Luke Trill. Very much looking forward to that. He's, of course, the head of More in Common. Luke Trill coming up at 8:15.
Right, let's have a look now, shall we, at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the next few days are going to be a bit cooler. There will also be a risk of showers. Some of them, I'm afraid, are going to be heavy as well. It already feels pretty chilly out there this morning, especially after a touch of frost in the more rural parts of the north overnight. The morning will bring showers to the west with some heavy ones across southwest England. Elsewhere, it should be mainly dry with some sunny spells, but eastern England will see a few passing showers. Temperatures will be below average, especially in the north and east. The afternoon will stay much the same, although some more general rain will reach the far north and west of Scotland.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
After the break, we'll be talking more about the MV Hondius, the cruise ship in the South Atlantic and the Antivirus outbreak that has claimed 3 lives. We'll be right back.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Welcome back. You are looking at a live picture of the MV Hondius, the cruise ship, of course, that is currently off the coast of Cape Verde, off the coast of West Africa, and it is there stationary currently after Antivirus plagued the ship, and it will be moving from Cape Verde to Canary Islands coming up in the next day or so, following an intervention by the World Health Organization and the EU. The outbreak of the Antivirus has killed 3 people and left several others ill. Let's talk about it all with Dr. Jacqueline Weyer from the National Institute of Communicable Diseases in South Africa. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Good news that it's going to be moving on and ultimately allowing passengers to get off, albeit still with some significant delay.
Absolutely. I think it's quite a difficult time for those on board. And we are thinking of them. I'm not sure at this stage if the patients will actually be allowed to disembark or if the isolation will be continued. We are waiting for the directive on that. Of course, when these individuals are allowed to disembark, it will also be with some measures in place to ensure that we don't have a wider scale outbreak when they try to return home.
Just remind our viewers what hantavirus is and how it gets spread. I mean, can it be spread human to human easily?
So there are many different hantaviruses that cause different kinds of illnesses. So I'll focus on the virus that's involved with this current outbreak. So we believe that the Andes virus strain of hantavirus is involved in this particular outbreak. This is the only example of a hantavirus that can spread from human to human. Now, just to put that into context, and I always use the COVID-19 experience because I think that's a good frame of reference for most. So it does not transmit in the same way that COVID-19 transmit. COVID-19 was caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which was highly transmissible, and you didn't need close contact for transmission events to occur. In the case of Andes virus, the transmission rate is really low. You need close and prolonged contact. It's through respiratory droplets, but I call it a slow burner. It moves really slowly, which allows you a window of opportunity to contain the outbreak effectively.
You have seen some of the passengers evacuated to South Africa, is that right? How are they being treated and contained, I guess, as things stand?
Yes, we identified this outbreak after an individual was evacuated to South Africa for medical treatment. This in itself is not something uncommon. It happens daily. Patients are transported from all over to hospitals, particularly in Johannesburg, for expert medical interventions. And this was done in this case, of course, without knowing what we will be finding, but very astute clinical diagnosis from the South African clinical team suspecting hantavirus pulmonary syndrome in this individual. And within 24 hours, we were able to confirm that through laboratory testing. So yes, so this individual is currently hospitalized still in Johannesburg under strict isolation precautions to ensure that we don't see onward transmission. And then there was another case. This was an individual that was linked to the index case of this outbreak, the wife of the first case. Her husband died on board, and the body was offloaded at St. Helena Island. And then the wife decided to travel back to the Netherlands. These were Dutch citizens, and she tried to make her way through Johannesburg back to the Netherlands, but collapsed at our international airport. Again, we could very quickly move to make the diagnosis in this case as well. So through the clinical recognition and the laboratory testing done here in South Africa, we were able to rapidly identify this outbreak, which triggered the international response for containment.
Who ultimately takes responsibility for this? Is it the cruise ship operator, or can this virus kind of come out of nowhere through no fault of the cruise ship owners and operators?
I don't think anyone's at fault here. The exposure event that would have triggered this outbreak was probably a exposure to a rodent through the course of the travels. We do suspect that this exposure event occurred during travels through Argentina, but investigations are ongoing to try and clarify the histories of these patients. So there's a history prior to the boarding of the ship that I think will be quite relevant in this instance. Investigations have found no rodent infestations on the ship itself. So we really do believe that we will find that the exposure event was an haphazard event during the course of touring through tourist touring through Argentina.
Jacqueline, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, we'll continue, of course, with our coverage of what is going on with the cruise ship. But in the meantime, we have some important and exciting news at least as far as Wolf is considering it. I'm going to let you read this one. Go on.
Arsenal have booked their place in the Champions League final for the first time in 20 years after they beat Atletico Madrid last night at the Emirates Stadium. Well, it was 1-1 after the first leg. Bukayo Saka scored the only goal of the game just before half-time. It finished 2-1 on aggregate, and Arsenal will now face either PSG or Bayern Munich in the final after their semi-final game tonight. Epic. I was up a little bit late watching it, obviously, but a long way still to go.
How optimistic are you feeling?
It's the final. It's a coin toss.
Got to be in it to win it.
Got to be in it to win it. Look, I think people claim PSG or Bayern will be slight favourites. I think it's going to be very, very close. And I think if Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka stay fit for the rest of the season, we'll get there.
Wolf's been trying to get out there, haven't you, as well?
Well, obviously, get through. Haven't got my ticket yet.
No.
Already looking at flight options. And, yeah, you only live once. Got to try and go, I think, don't you?
I think so. I think so.
On a
100%.
Saturday as well, so, you know,
Perfectly
don't have
lined
to get
up
up at 3:30 the next day.
Perfectly lined
on the
up.
topic of flights where you might be tempted to have a cheeky lager.
Yeah, Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary has renewed calls for airports to limit how they serve alcohol to passengers. Nothing to do with the fact that Will's just looking to buy a flight out to the Arsenal, by the way. These two things are totally unrelated.
It's interesting. So he's obviously come out and he's always fairly outspoken. He says, it's become a real challenge for airlines. I fail to understand why anybody in airport bears is serving people at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning who needs to be drinking beer at that time. I mean, when he puts it that way, fair enough. 5 a.m, do you really need it? The question is, do you have to tar everyone with the same brush? And is there not an alternative approach to punish people who overdo it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when he says it like that, it's kind of a reasonable point.
This was the Richard Holden point, the Conservatives' Shadow Transport Secretary. He said that it was draconian to try and limit alcohol to just a pint or two. Email us with your thoughts. Do you think it is absolutely part of your, part of the holiday, I guess, to kind of unwind the airport with a pint or a glass of wine as soon as you get there? Or actually, is there no excuse to be drinking at 6 a.m? And I guess it's the disruption, isn't it? This is the thing. If you're being disruptive to other passengers, no one can choose who they sit next to on a plane.
It does taste good at the airport, doesn't it?
It does. Let us know. Warnings at sky.uk.
We are going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll have all the day's top stories, including the very latest from the Middle East, as hopes around peace talks pick up again. We'll be right back.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Richie and Frost.
With Sophie and Worth, good morning from me as well. Lots to update you on this morning.
President Trump pauses the US operation to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz after he says great progress has been made on a deal with Iran.
Deserted decks and PPE-clad medical workers inside the Antivirus-stricken cruise ship now heading for the Canary Islands.
People who carry out anti-Semitic attacks on behalf of Iran face up to 14 years in jail as the Metropolitan Police announce 100 new officers to protect Jewish communities.
We'll also be talking about the battle for the future of OpenAI, joined by the tech journalist and podcaster Kara Swisher.
And good news for Arsenal fans. Bukayo Saka fires them into the Champions League final for the first time in 20 years.
Hello, thanks for being with us today. In a surprise move overnight, President Trump has announced he is pausing efforts to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, so-called Project Freedom, in order to move forward with a deal with Iran.
It comes just 3 days after he announced the initiative, which saw US vessels attempt to guide commercial ships out of the waterway, and only hours after his own cabinet secretaries were talking up the mission. President Trump said that great progress, though, had been made on a potential deal.
Well, on social media, Donald Trump has said, based on the request of Pakistan and other countries, the tremendous military success that we've had during the campaign against the country of Iran, and additionally, the fact that great progress has been made towards a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran, we've mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force in effect, Project Freedom, the movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not the agreement can be finalised and signed.
Well, our US correspondent David Blevins has this update for us from Washington.
This really is an extraordinary decision by President Trump. In his post on Truth Social, he's celebrating America's military success and what he calls the great progress they've made towards a deal with Iran. But make no mistake about it, he's pressing pause on his flagship project to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, on the very day when he urged Iran to throw in the towel.
They should wave, they're very proud. Maybe you won't see a white flag, but essentially that's already what they are. They should wave the white flag of surrender.
And this may have taken Donald Trump's own cabinet by surprise, because it came just hours after two of them, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the man who calls himself Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, both boasted that they had shifted their focus from the war to securing the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, as you know, President Trump has directed U.S. Central Command to restart the free flow of commerce through the Strait of Hormuz under the umbrella of Project Freedom.
The operation is over. Epic Fury, as the president notified Congress, we're done with that stage of it. Okay, we're now on to this Project of Freedom.
That's two cabinet secretaries talking up Project Freedom, which the president is now winding down while he attempts to strike a deal with Iran. No ships in, no ships out, the US blockade firmly in place, and much of the world's oil supply with nowhere to go. So where will this president go next? Can he find a way out of this war that many feel America should never have got involved in?
David Blevins there for us. Well, Sally joins us now from Dubai. Sally, is this being framed as a big positive step towards peace talks, or as a kind of negative development that trying to free the movement of ships up through the Strait of Hormuz didn't work?
Yeah, I think the reality is that this is Donald Trump's latest attempt to restart safe passage for commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, and it hasn't worked. I don't think it's necessarily an encouraging sign that diplomatic efforts are going very well, but certainly it does appear that neither side wants to acknowledge that this ceasefire has collapsed, because they know the alternative is a return to all-out fighting and escalation, which neither party seems to want at this stage. But if we look at what has happened in the last couple of days, Project Freedom has thrown in an enormous amount of US military might to try and reopen this critical waterway, and it hasn't worked. It's lasted around 2 days, and in that time, just 2 commercial civilian vessels have made it through the Strait of Hormuz that we're aware of with the support of the US military. So diplomatic efforts are now the focus, but also we have to look at what this means for the ceasefire, because the other big concern in the last couple of days is not only for the US that Project Freedom simply wasn't working, but it represented the biggest threat to the ceasefire in the last month. The UAE has been attacked twice now in the last 2 days by Iran. The Ministry of Defence confirming that more missiles and drones were fired at the UAE yesterday. No confirmation of damage or injuries, but on Monday they managed to strike a significant oil facility here in the UAE. So, you know, Iran has said we're not behind these attacks because they don't want to own them publicly, for the same reason that the US doesn't want to acknowledge that this ceasefire may be unravelling. But certainly it's not a good look at this stage, and it doesn't look very encouraging at all. We're going to have to wait and see how things play out in the next 24 hours to see if the UAE could be hit with more attacks today. But one encouraging sign, perhaps, is that the Iranian foreign minister is meeting his counterpart in Beijing today. And China has a huge vested interest in what is going on in this region at the moment. They are one of the most exposed major economies when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. Around half of their imported crude oil flows from Gulf states through the Strait of Hormuz. So will Beijing be able to make the difference here in these bilateral talks today? Certainly Secretary of State Marco Rubio is hoping so. But when it comes to the ceasefire, it remains extremely fragile indeed, and it's really impacted people's lives already here. Schools have closed within hours of those first attacks resuming on Monday evening. There was an announcement that schools are going to be closed for the rest of the week here. A lot of concern that we're going to see that stretched into next week and potentially beyond. There's travel disruption as well. I'd say a lot of concern that this is going to be a second wave of daily attacks that we saw before. And certainly Iran is now singling out the UAE along with the US when it comes to warning them that they're going to retaliate if there's any more action or perceived military involvement when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. And certainly I think for the next 24 hours, it's going to be absolutely critical, and we're just going to have to wait and see how it all plays out.
Sally, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for that. And oil prices off the back of this have eased, but not that significantly. We're still at $108 a barrel for Brent crude.
Let's bring you the latest update on the cruise ship that's been crippled by an outbreak of Antivirus, leaving passengers trapped on board, while Spain has now offered them a lifeline, announcing that the ship is now allowed to sail to the Canary Islands so that people can get off there.
And it should arrive within the next 3 or 4 days. Of course, as we've been discussing over the last 24 hours, there are already 7 suspected cases of Antivirus and have been 3 deaths.
Well, let's have a look now at some pictures from on board. This is on board the ship. So you can see the decks deserted. You can see their medical teams there in protective gear making their way around the ship. 3 dying so far, several sick patients on board are actually being evacuated to Cape Verde, so before the ship leaves the Canary Islands, so that they can get urgent medical help.
Well, the MV Hondius has been anchored off the country's coast in the South Atlantic, of course, for the last couple of days now. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has this report.
It's sold as an Antarctic Odyssey, a spectacular 42-night cruise from the Antarctic Circle, crossing the equator to the coast of West Africa. A once-in-a-lifetime dream.
For going in the ice and spotting wildlife like whales, this is a perfect ship.
The ship's chef posted this picture on the night before they set sail. But Kabir Moraes, on the bottom right, and his shipmates on board the MV Hondius did not know that their dream would turn into a nightmare. Just 10 days into their cruise, a passenger died, others fell critically ill, and the ship is now at the centre of a suspected Antivirus outbreak. The MV Hondius set sail on the cruise, which cost anywhere between £6,000 and £18,000, on the 1st of April from Argentina. It made its way through the southern Atlantic Ocean on its way to Cape Verde on the 3rd of May, and that's where it remains.
The plan now is for the ship to continue on to the Canary Islands. We're working with Spanish authorities who will welcome the ship, have said that they will welcome the ship, to do a full investigation, a full epidemiologic investigation, full disinfection of the ship, and of course to assess the risk of the passengers that are actually on board.
Antivirus is spread through rodent droppings, urine or saliva. The virus particles, once dried out, can be breathed in. Early symptoms are like flu, but can turn into a deadly infection of the lungs or kidneys. Human-to-human transmission is extremely rare, but WHO experts think that this may be happening on board the Hondius. So far, 3 passengers have died, a German traveller and a Dutch couple, whose family paid this tribute. The beautiful journey they experienced together was abruptly and permanently cut short. We are still unable to comprehend that we have lost them. We wish to bring them home and commemorate them in peace and privacy. The ordeal for the passengers and crew of the MV Hondius is not yet over. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
So this is live pictures now of that boat, the MV Hondius. They are currently off the coast of Cape Verde. They're still waiting for those ill passengers to leave the boats so that it can get urgent medical attention in Cape Verde before it then sails to the Canary Islands, where it's hoped people will then be allowed to disembark. That journey, though, will take 3 to 4 days.
And the FCDO, the Foreign Office, released this statement. They said, our thoughts are with all those who've lost their lives and been affected in this tragedy. The safety and well-being of British nationals is our #1 priority. We're working to get people safely home as fast as possible, and Foreign Office ministers are in touch with international counterparts to facilitate this. FCDO staff have been in touch with British nationals on board directly, offering consular support via phone and email. Excuse me, our consular services remain available to British nationals 24/7.
Our teams have been working with local authorities in Cape Verde and with the Dutch government to progress safe medevacs for sick passengers at the earliest possible opportunity ahead of the ship's proposed move. This includes detailed ongoing planning work to assess all routes for safe medical evacuation if required, as well as safe repatriation of all British nationals on board at the earliest opportunity. They continue. We've also been closely in contact with the administrations of the 4 UK overseas territories the vessel called at, and are taking urgent steps to ensure that their medical authorities have the right support.
Now, let's talk about the rise in anti-Semitic attacks that we've seen recently. People could face up to 14 years in prison for attacks on Jewish sites that are carried out on behalf of Iran. The government is planning to include legislation in the King's speech next week, which will allow the Home Secretary to designate proxy groups as a foreign intelligence service.
So meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police has also announced that 100 police officers will now be allocated to a new dedicated community protection team to try and help protect the Jewish community. Let's talk now to our correspondent, Graham, who joins us now. So we're getting a little bit more detail, haven't we, of the government's response to this rise in anti-Semitism?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest criticisms was that words weren't being matched with action, and now, obviously, there's a big effort to show that actually things are being done. If you remember, in the aftermath of the Golders Green incident, the Met Commissioner Mark Rowley said 300 officers would be needed to combat the tide of rising anti-Semitism. They're calling this 100 the first phase of that, focused primarily on protecting that community, because, as you alluded to, there's a state-level concern here. Police saying that they now face significant terrorist and hostile state threats. There have been more incidents in recent days. Police are investigating a suspected arson attack at a former synagogue. Rocks were thrown at a Jewish community ambulance as well. And in the past 4 weeks alone, Metropolitan Police have made 50 arrests for anti-Semitic hate crimes. The chief prosecutor for England and Wales has said prosecutions for such crimes need to be fast-tracked. And we now also understand that the government is set to introduce new legislation which, as you said, could see people convicted of anti-Semitic attacks orchestrated from Tehran face up to 14 years in prison. These are the hostile state threats that have been mentioned. Allegations that Iranian efforts to stir up hatred could in part be to blame for the uplift in anti-Semitic attacks. And the interesting part of that, particularly interesting, is that actually you could be prosecuted potentially for 14 years, charged with given 14 years in prison potentially, without actually knowing that you were acting on behalf of the Iranian state, if you like, almost tricked into it. It wouldn't be a defence.
OK, thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thanks so much. We just want to tease ahead to what's coming up at 1:30 this hour. We'll be talking to the tech journalist and podcaster Kara Swisher. We'll be talking about the ongoing battle in the US between Elon Musk and Sam Altman over OpenAI and very much more. It's coming up at 8:30.
Yeah, I look forward to that one. In the meantime, it's the final day of campaigning before voters head to the polls for the English local council elections and the devolved parliamentary elections in Wales and Scotland. So if you have been getting bombarded and sick of the leaflets through your door, there's not one to go, I think is the upshot.
Yeah. Lucy's here with us. Lucy, in terms of the kind of final day of campaigning, what are we expecting? Everyone's out and about quite aggressively?
Yeah, aggressively is the word for it. And actually, I've just been scrolling through social media and they're all getting their final posts out online with what their messages are. Keir Starmer has just put one out in the past 15 minutes or so saying vote Labour for a party that's on your side. And the message from them is very much kind of trying to tell people that parties, these insurgent parties like the Green and Reform, they accuse them of divisive politics, trying to tear people apart, trying to tear communities apart. They're saying they are the ones that have a plan. Of course, for Labour, it's very difficult to see how going into these elections, that message, their message will make things any easier for them. It's said to be incredibly challenging. They've got more than 2,500 seats that they're defending. They could lose, I mean, on a really, really, really bad night, they could lose 2,000 of them. Interestingly, we had Pat McFadden on just now, a cabinet minister, I suppose, sent out to, I think quite interestingly, send a message to their MPs to say, you might be talking about Keir Starmer's leadership, you might be talking about replacing him. The message there, don't, because he is going to fight it. Let's just listen to what he said.
How's he feeling at the minute? Is he feeling like, you know, like he's going to face down any challenge?
Yes, he is feeling that. He's remarkably resolute, and he knows that to turn inward at this moment or to turn inward after Thursday would be a mistake. The Prime Minister was elected for a 5-year term, and he should serve out that term. I think this country has tested to destruction the idea that the answer to our problems is to swipe left on our prime ministers. We've seen too much of that in the past 10 to 15 years. It hasn't solved our problems. It has added to political chaos and uncertainty. That has economic as well as political consequences, and I don't think that's the answer to the situation that we're in at the moment.
I think you hit the nail on the head where this is, I guess, a deliberate move by Number 10. Because, you know, obviously when these guys come on these programmes, they're partly speaking to us, they're mainly speaking to the audience, but they're also, in this case, I think, speaking to Labour MPs.
Yeah, and we've seen quite a bit of that in the past couple of weeks or so. Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, was out on the weekend doing the same. What they're not doing is denying the fact that there is chatter around Keir Starmer's leadership, what these elections mean for him. So instead, what they're doing is coming out and saying to Labour MPs, don't replace Keir Starmer, because that's only going to return us to the politics that we've seen of the past. So that's really interesting. What they're doing is admitting that they are preparing themselves for an incredibly, incredibly challenging 48 hours. What happens after that? We simply don't know until then. There is a lot of speculation about what's happening, but at the moment, no concrete plans.
Given all that's happening in the world, it's quite a compelling... I mean, just hearing him say it there, it's quite a compelling point to make, which is, you know, don't make this about us. We've got to make it about what's going on. So we'll see if it works. It all comes down to quite how bad or not the results are.
And it also, I think, bizarrely comes down to who Labour MPs want to replace him. Because if they want Andy Burnham, they don't want anything immediately because he's not in Parliament yet.
Exactly. And also, I think one of the things, arguably, is saving Keir Starmer is the fact that there is no one clear successor that they can all get behind. If they can sort that out, then maybe they would replace him if they could. We'll see.
Delay.
Well, a lot depends on what the results will be. Lucy, thanks so much. Let's talk a little bit more about that now with the founder of more in common. The pollster Luke Trill. Very good morning to you, Luke. Thanks.
Good morning.
So much for joining us. What's your latest snapshot of how things might play out?
Well, it looks like Reform are heading into these elections quite strong. They lead in Westminster voting intention, as they have for well over a year now. You've then got the two traditional main parties somewhere in the high teens, low 20s, which, you know, we kind of got used to, but it's pretty extraordinary. And then you've got the Greens, who are coming up the rear, you know, real burst of momentum since the election of Zach Polanski at the end of last year. But perhaps the last week hasn't been quite as good for the Greens.
Yeah, I'm interested to get a bit more detail on that. I think it's really interesting. But before we kind of go on to the Greens in particular, I spent some time in Tameside last week, which was just so... it's so illuminating always just to get out and talk to people. And I think what really shocked me, maybe it shouldn't have, but it did, was just the kind of dissatisfaction with all of them. Like, yeah, there were a lot of people who were going to vote Reform, but not really because they kind of loved Reform, just because they just didn't really like any of the others. The Conservatives, it felt like, were complete irrelevance almost.
Absolutely. So we've been travelling right around the country in the run-up to these elections, so across England, Scotland, Wales, voters in very different areas, voters with very different political beliefs. One thing that unites them is this sense that the social contract just isn't working in the UK. And that's whether you're like a young grad in Hackney who is worried about getting on the housing ladder, can't pay off your student loans, or you're a retiree in Sunderland thinking, I don't have what I thought I'd have for my retirement now. Right across this board, just this sense that doing the right thing, hard work and effort doesn't pay, and something has to give. And that's why what we're going to see, you know, I don't make predictions, but I think one thing I think I'm confident of saying is we're going to see politics splintering even further on Thursday, right across the country. People going to the Greens, to Reform, to independent candidates, as people say, what we've got now, it ain't working.
Clearly, one thing we'll be reacting to on Friday and Saturday is the change in seats and who's won or lost seats. In terms of the split of the vote, the percentage of the vote across the country, do you think that will be indicative of if a general election was held today as well, or not? Are they different types of votes?
They are different, because actually what matters a lot in these elections, more than a general election, because they're generally lower turnout, is who actually turns up to vote. And the interesting thing is, when you look at people who say they're 10 out of 10 likely to vote, the most enthusiastic, Reform UK are out on top. If you go to the other end, people who say I'm less than 7 out of 10 likely to vote, the Greens are actually on top. So who actually comes out will make a huge difference. And there will be calculations. So for Sky, there'll be what's known as the national equivalent vote, which will basically try and look at if the whole country had voted, what would it look like? But it's still a local election turnout. There'll be a similar one on other outlets. So you can make comparisons with other local elections, but perhaps not the general election. And worth remembering, people do traditionally use local elections to punish the government of the day.
Let's talk about the Greens in particular, because you had a really eye-catching piece of research that I think we can just bring you now. This is the kind of personal approval ratings of... Oh, it's on the screen, there we go, even better. These are the personal approval ratings of all the kind of main 5 party leaders. Kenny Badenoch up top, I mean, they're all in negative territory. Then you've got Ed Davey, Nigel Farage. But if you just look at that green there for Zach Polanski, I mean, obviously he's still doing a lot better than Keir Starmer, but he is down -27. I mean, that's a huge drop in just a very short time.
It is a significant drop, and, you know, I mean, I often call this graph the battle to be least disapproved of. But actually what seems to have happened, and again, we did focus groups over the weekend, which gives some kind of flavour to why this might have happened, is that, you know, one of the things Zach Polanski has done really well is, particularly with some young people, is channeled this kind of politics of hope. It seems like a sort of happier politics, a more inclusive politics. I think his reaction to what happened in Golders Green and some of the allegations of anti-Semitism around Green candidates has just made some of those voters go, oh, this isn't quite what I thought it is. This isn't quite that more hopeful, inclusive politics there. And I think that has hurt him. And as you can see, it is quite a significant shift. And if you go under the numbers, what you see is, yes, it's a rise in people who perhaps already weren't going to vote Green, saying, I don't like him, but also some of his supporters, some people who had a positive approval, now saying, oh, I'm not so sure, they move into the middle. So it's on both sides there.
Two other things jump out to me when I look at this, which is the steady improvement for Kemi Badenoch, though still negative, and as you said, the polls to the party aren't that great. With Keir Starmer, obviously it's very low, but it hasn't got that much worse in the last month, where we've all been talking, we talk about getting out and about and the Westminster bubble, all been talking about Ollie Robbins and Peter Mandelson. It's almost as if it hasn't got progressively worse in the last month.
Yes, I mean, they're two really interesting stories. There has very definitely been a change in some people's opinion of Kemi Badenoch. I hear it around the country. People say, I like the fact she says it like it is. She takes on Keir Starmer forcefully. But, and there's always a but, aren't the Conservatives irrelevant now? And, which again is a pretty amazing sign of how our politics have changed. And so, her task now is she's doing better. Can she lift up the party brand? For Keir Starmer, I think you're right. The one thing I would say is that when you're down there at -45, that means you've got somewhere between sort of 10 to 15% of people who say you're doing a good job.
So is that it? Just 10 to 15%?
It's hard because that's a net score, and you've got other people on the negative. So it's hard to get much lower. But it is worth saying there are a group of people, and we speak to them in focus groups. Keir Starmer has lots of critics. He's very unpopular with lots of people. But there is a core of people who say, no, I want to give him more time. I want to let him get on. And in particular, he has very definitely plaudits for how he's handled the Iran conflict. And I think that might be balancing out some of the further Mandelson revelations.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It came up a bit, actually, I have to say. That was the one positive thing people were saying about Keir Starmer and Tameside. At least he didn't drag us into a foreign war like Tony Blair. That's the one positive thing, I think. It's been so interesting to talk. We're going to be...
Oh, I have one final question. Turnout in a general is usually, what, 60 to 70%? Yeah. In a locals, what?
30, 40.
And so 40 would be a very high end.
Yeah,
Be a bit higher than normal, this one?
If you're getting up there. It could be because you've got Reform people who really want change, Greens want change. You've also got kind of a lot of, I want to vote to stop that person. So you might get more sort of tactical voting, which drives up turnout as well.
It's really interesting, though, the fact that we're talking about turnout only as 30, 40. It does show that it isn't entirely representative of, the whole country and of general elections. But, Luke, really great stuff. Thanks so much.
I just want to bring you a breaking story about Zach Polanski, who we've been talking about, of course, in relation to those approval ratings. He has apologised in the last few moments for claiming to be a spokesperson for the British Red Cross. This is in relation to a story in the Times, the British Red Cross telling the Times that Polanski has not been a spokesperson for the charity, saying it's raised the issue with the Greens. He had claimed it on a personal website back in 2020, where he said that he was really proud of the work we do, falsely claiming to be a spokesperson for the Red Cross. But we can tell you now that he has, in the last few minutes, apologised. I used the wrong word, but I accept that.
Telling the BBC in the last few minutes about that particular point. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking tech with Kara Swisher, the journalist and podcaster. We'll be right back.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to warn.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. The battle of the future of OpenAI wages on in court in the US as two of the biggest names in tech go head-to-head. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, owner of social media platform X and chief executive of electric car company Tesla, is taking on Sam Altman, the head of the world's best-known artificial intelligence company OpenAI. I'm joined by tech journalist, podcaster Kara Swisher. Great to have you with us. Thanks so much for coming in. Why don't we start on this battle that's unfolding in the US? I mean, I guess what it's reminding everyone of, slightly to state the obvious, is that OpenAI was a charity, is now for profit.
Yeah.
Is that going to be allowed to stand, or do you think this court case has a chance of overturning some of that?
No, I don't think so. I think most people think Elon's going to lose this one. I mean, because there's ample evidence that he didn't mind it shifting over to a different kind of organization. And also, he tried to take control of it, and he was rejected, and then he flounced off and signed the papers. Very much like when he bought Twitter and then said he didn't want it. There's a lot of proof that he knew what he was doing.
Does it reveal the sort of questionable motives of the people running OpenAI, or at least how they changed their motives, or is seeking profit absolutely fine?
They changed their motives, but Elon was in on it too. Like, to act like he's dumb now when he tells everyone how smart he is a little kind of hard. He seeks to control everything, and at that point, I was there when it started, and it was started because the power of Google and Meta, then Facebook, was so vast they were worried. Elon was too, about what would happen if AI was in the hands of just a small group of people. But, you can't go off and then create another AI company, a for-profit one, and say that all you care about is the safety of humanity, because that's what he's doing at Grok, with questionable results, given the non-consensual sexual content on there and essentially child pornography. So I'm not so sure we want to take our safety tips from Elon Musk.
In terms of safety tips, I'll come to AI in just a moment, but wanted to dwell on social media first.
Sure.
Obviously, as you know, Australia's banned social media for under 16s. It is looking increasingly likely that will happen now here in the UK, though we're not there yet. How does that sort of thing go down in the US, where obviously these companies are US companies we're talking about? Does it go down like a ton of bricks? Do people start to think it's okay?
Not the voters, no. Most people, it's a bipartisan feeling that the safety is out of control of these things, and we've had really bad experience with them. And I think it was really, the US government has really abrogated its power here to these tech companies, and even more so during the Trump administration. It's not a new thing. But one of the things that's happening is there's a real big backlash against AI. There's a backlash against data centers. Obviously a backlash against phone use. And if you have to go to this extreme of banning it, that says something, that they weren't able to self-regulate because they aren't able to self-regulate. And there needs to be some guardrails in place for all of this.
What do you think the result of this is? I mean, obviously, some countries like ours banning it for under 16s, some civil cases that have been quite high profile in the US, though there'll be appeals to come. Do you think it will lead to significant self-regulation from the tech companies or not?
They haven't done it so far. Why would they? They do everything for shareholder value. I mean, the first line of my book many years ago, which everyone thought at the time was too mean, and it turns out it's not mean enough, was it was capitalism after all. They're interested in shareholder value, and that's it. They do not have any interest in the community or anything else. And so we shouldn't force them to do it themselves, because they won't. They just won't. And so we have legislators who are elected by the people, and they should have stepped in, and they haven't done. I mean, there are no rules governing tech companies in the United States, zero. After all this time, no privacy rules, no algorithmic transparency rules. And so what's really interesting is that there's a real movement from the people who are sick and tired of this effect on their kids, the worries about AI, the lack of government accountability here. And so it's forcing people into more drastic solutions probably wouldn't have been had we had good guardrails in place.
One of the big issues, I think, with social media has been that they've never been held to account as publishers. It's been down to the individual
they call themselves
post.
platagers.
Exactly.
Right.
Will that be the same for AI? I mean, there's obviously a couple of very important cases coming. Do you think ultimately they will be classed as publishers?
I think it's a new thing, and things change as technologies change. They are not under Section 230, which protected social media companies unnecessarily at this point. And so these lawsuits are really important. If we have to sue them, we have to sue them. And they're losing. They're losing every time they get sued. They just have unlimited funds in order to fight these poor parents. Or, I've spent a lot of time talking to parents of kids who've committed suicide, and they're absolutely responsible, these companies, for the shoddy products they put out to the public.
And some of those cases, obviously, are getting much more coverage and cutting through, as we discussed as well with social media as well for under 16s. Step back and broadly talk about how people are embracing AI or not, because you have quite an interesting view on this. Yes. It's not that popular.
No, I both think it could be a real boon. Like, electricity is great, except when it electrocutes you. And unfortunately, we've let the electrocutionists run the asylum, essentially. And so I think some of it's really interesting, but there hasn't been a thoughtful discussion about the strictures we should have, about job issues, and what are we going to do about that, and what responsibility do tech companies have. We've done it on planes, we've done it on cigarettes, we've done it on all nuclear weapons. Everything gets a big old think except for technology, because I don't know, are they the smartest people on the planet? I know they're the richest. And so they're trying very hard to act like they shouldn't be accountable the way every other business, this company, every company has responsibilities, and so do they.
In terms of where the market is, you've obviously covered many booms and busts and cycles of the like, and the word bubble gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
But as we sit here right now, tech stocks as a whole, AI stocks, are we much closer to the top than the bottom? Are we in a bubble? What do you think?
It's kind of a bubble the way the internet was a bubble. Like, there was a lot of companies, and then there weren't, but Google, but Meta, but you know what I mean? There'll be one or two that really dominate. In this case, the one that's really coming up the middle is Anthropic, which is focused on the enterprise. They're also making a brand of responsibility, right? They're the only ones talking about safety. And so you can see them being like the Apple of this era, right? While the others are more shabby in a lot of ways. And so, yes, there's not going to be as many, and they'll probably be bought up. There's rumors of Apple buying Perplexity. This money can't be spent, but that happened in the early internet, and you wanted to bet on a few of them.
You're here in London because you're speaking at the Truth Teller Summit.
I am.
Later today. We had Tina Brown join us yesterday morning. Absolutely terrific, I agree. And I guess on the topic of truth telling, do you feel that America's business leaders that you and I have covered closely for years, are they speaking truth to power right now?
No, not at all. They're giving
How
in.
bad has it got?
Well, Trump shakes them down. Like, everyone sort of blames Trump, who's really terrible in this thing, but they give in. And so at some point, we all know who Trump is, right? We get him pretty clearly in the United States at this point, as you notice, plummeting levels of polls. But they have been really irresponsible in pushing back at this administration. And I know he can do them damage, but at the same time, at some point, enough is enough with this guy. And so paying these payments out, trying to get stuff through, deals they want to do, it's kind of venal in a lot of ways. And at some point, there's going to be a reckoning of what these companies have done. But corporate media has not pushed back at all. And that's why independent media has thrived. I mean, it's interesting because, like, I have one of the top 10 podcasts in the world. Like, I'm by myself, like that kind of stuff. And so there's all kinds of, Tina herself is entrepreneurial. And one of the things that she wrote today was, as we move into the age of AI, you can't automate trust, and you can't automate an audience who really trusts human beings. And ultimately, you can use the AI tools or any technology tools, but it ultimately rests with people doing incredible reporting, like Julie K. Brown with Epstein. There's so many examples of that. And I think these corporate companies, these corporate leaders need to, toughen up a little bit.
Cara, it's great to see you as always. Thanks so much for stopping by, and enjoy the Truth Teller Summit, as I'm sure you will. Thanks so much, Cara Swisher.
Some very wise words.
Thank you.
I have to say. We do have some breaking news to bring you on the cruise ship. So this is the A cruise ship that's been hit by Antivirus, people ill on board. They're currently stuck outside Cape Verde. They had been promised safe passage and able to disembark in the Canary Islands. However, the leader of Spain's Canary Islands has just told Reuters, according to Reuters, rejected the fact that the Antivirus hit cruise ship is able to dock there. The leader of Spain's Canary Islands has said that ship will not be allowed to dock in the Canary Islands. He's also demanded an urgent meeting with the Spanish Prime Minister Sanchez to discuss the situation. So the leader of the Canary Islands has rejected the docking of the ship infected by Antivirus. You can see it currently there, just off the coast of Cape Verde. Some passengers who are infected, who are ill, will be able to disembark in Cape Verde to get that immediate medical attention. But it is unclear what happens to the rest of them.
Brutal. I mean, can you imagine just being stuck with nowhere to go in the meantime? Obviously comes after the WHO and the EU tried to intervene to help change the direction of travel of this, but no solution yet.
And it was going to be 3 to 4 days even to get to the Canary Islands. And if they were unable to dock there, it gives you a bit of a sense of the scale of time we're talking for the people still on that ship.
Yeah, thoughts for those people as well. Now, let's have a look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
The next few days will be cooler with a risk of showers. Some of them will be heavy. It already feels quite chilly out there this morning, especially after a touch of frost in more rural parts of the north overnight. This morning, we'll see showers to the west with some heavy ones across southwest England. Elsewhere, it will be mainly dry with sunny spells, but eastern England will see a few passing showers. Temperatures will be below average, especially in the north and the east. The afternoon will stay much the same, although more general rain will reach the far north and west of Scotland. That's your weather.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Coming up, we are continuing our coverage of the elections that are coming up tomorrow and focusing next on the elections to the Scottish Parliament. Going to be an absolutely critical set of votes. We'll be talking to the leader of the Scottish Greens.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to in the Rose Garden, in the East Wing?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Hello again. Today is the final day of campaigning before voters head to the polls for the English local elections and also parliamentary elections in Wales and Scotland.
Well, our correspondent Sam Coates spoke with Kemi Badenoch on the campaign trail in Birmingham for the latest in our series of interviews with party leaders.
All right, so are you sure I don't need overalls?
One last stop outside London before the election.
It's not perfect. There's still a bit there.
The West Midlands, a swing region, and the polls suggest they're swinging reform.
Many people feel that life is not fair. We want to bring some fairness back. I think that's a message that will really resonate here in the West Midlands.
The Tory leader sat down with me to assess the first 19 months she's spent in the job. Clear from the outset, there's a long way to go.
Kemi Badenoch, welcome to the scrap heap, as it looks like. Do you think the elections on Thursday will allow you, as Tory leader, to be able to claim that you've made progress? And if so, which bits of the country should we look to?
Yes, what people are seeing is a new Conservative Party under a new leader, and I am changing things. People like our policies. They're very popular up and down the country. What we need to really focus on now is winning trust.
You have jumped in that answer that I listened to hard away from the results on in the early hours of Friday morning. Are you concerned that that's because if you look at them, they could look like things are getting worse compared to the moment that you were elected?
Because the world that we're in is changing. People are retreating into tribes. We're seeing a lot of fragmentation across the board. But if you compare the results next Thursday with last year, you will see that progress is being made.
I mean, I have heard people talk about multi-party politics for the better part of 2 decades. It tends to be the people who are doing less well rather than better who throw in multi-party politics as a
well, except it's the reality. I mean, you only just need to look at what is happening. It is multi-party politics. No one can deny that.
Expectation management in full swing. She wants us to compare the results to last year, not the general election, the year she entered the job.
Local election results and general election results don't necessarily tarry. Or marry up. What is important is, are we making progress versus how people viewed the Conservative Party last year, year on year? I want to see us moving forward. We will have some good results.
She says she's changed the party, but with Tory councils putting up tax and blocking planning decisions, has it really changed that much?
30 of the 35 Tory-led councils put up council tax by the maximum needed without a referendum. Pretty much identical in proportion to other parties. Being a lower tax party is something that the Tories have said since year dot, but you just still, as a party, don't deliver it.
Well, one of the things that we need to recognise is that many councils get their money from the government. You look at the rural payments grants. Labour has changed this to favour urban areas. That's one of the reasons why Conservative councils, which are quite often in rural areas, are having to do things differently. But you look at the services they provide, they're still delivering more compared to other councils. So I'm not saying Conservative councils are perfect. I'm not saying they don't do anything wrong, but across the board, you can rely on them.
The Tories would allow their local councillors to do deals with reform if it advances a Conservative agenda. This, the biggest difference with the other main parties.
Local level, you've been very clear that this is up to local leaders to make the best decision to work out who, if there's a minority arrangement, to make the council or the parliament leader. So in theory, a vote on Thursday could mean Tories propping up a reform-led administration somewhere. Now, that's a big difference because the Greens, the Lib Dems, Labour, all nationalist parties, they all say they wouldn't do that, but the Tories would. Do you accept that that's a big difference in terms of attitude to reform?
So we have a test case. Last year, we had lots of elections where reform won many councils. How many of them are being run with Conservatives? 0. So we have proof. We are willing to work with people who will help deliver Conservative policies.
High spirits at her last election rally. This attests to the electorate and party morale. The shadow over this party, how to deal with Nigel Farage. Sam Coates, Sky News, Solihull.
Sam Coates there, speaking to Kemi Badenoch, and over the last few weeks we've also been speaking to all of the major parties up for election tomorrow in Scotland. Joining us now is the co-leader of the Scottish Greens, Ross Greer. Great to have you with us. Thank you for being with us.
Sophie?
It looks like it is very, very possible, probable, likely that there'll be a pro-independence majority after the elections tomorrow with the SNP and the Scottish Greens. If that is the case, how quickly will you be pushing for another referendum?
If a majority of the Parliament is elected on pro-independence manifestos, that is a mandate for us to immediately push for Scotland to be given the right to make that choice about its own future. The Greens have been clear that the reason that we're surging in these polls is that we've actually delivered things that save people money, free bus travel for young people, scrapping peak rail fares. But there are limits, really hard limits, to what we can achieve with the current powers that the Scottish Parliament and government actually have. Things like energy. We can't cut people's energy bills. Westminster controls the energy system, and it does it to maximise the profits of a handful of companies, not to make energy cheaper for everyone. So the Greens see the need for Scotland to become an independent nation as an urgent one, especially now that Reform are threatening any constituency in Scotland that elects a Green MSP if they take on the UK government after the next general election.
Now, there's always so many kind of national issues that people ask about in these kind of interviews, but there is one policy that I did want to touch on with you because I actually think it is potentially a really significant and interesting one. You want to raise the school starting age to 7 and introduce play-based learning for 3 to 6-year-olds. And I'm interested in this because, honestly, if you talk to a lot of people in education, they say that this kind of policy would actually make a big difference to young kids. Just explain to us why you want to see that happen.
We know that for young children, we know a lot more about how they learn, how their brains develop now than we did 100, 150 years ago when we set up the school system we have right now. Scotland's a real international outlier. We have 4.5-year-olds in primary 1 classrooms, and we know that's not natural for them. At that age, children learn best through play. They develop their social and emotional skills. Other countries that have that play-based kindergarten stage between 3 and 6, and then a school starting age of 7, they outperform Scotland and the rest of the UK in education. And what's really important there is it sets those children up to have a really positive view of education and learning. They perform better throughout the rest of their time at school, and they learn through play. In Scotland right now, our primary teachers in primary 1, 2, 3 are trying to deliver play-based learning, but it's a square peg round hole kind of situation because the system isn't designed for it. So the Greens would move to that kindergarten stage. There would still be the same level of education, the same amount of childcare provided, but we'd be changing how we do it because we know that children at that age, they learn best through play, and that's how you make sure that they have a real sense of joy about learning. And that, from all the evidence we can see, follows them right through the rest of their time in education, and they'll thrive as a result of that.
It's a kind of issue, I always think that it's important to kind of touch on in these interviews. We don't talk about it enough, frankly, and it's interesting to see your policy platform there. Now, I know you're separate from the Westminster Green Party, but I did want to get your view on allegations of anti-Semitism within the Westminster Green Party, because Caroline Lucas, the former leader, has put out a statement. She said, "Statements that have now come to light from a handful of Green Party candidates are totally unacceptable and require immediate action. There's no place for anti-Semitism or any hate speech in the party. This is a society-wide problem and needs to be rooted out wherever it's found." Do you agree with Caroline Lucas, and is there a specific problem when it comes to the Westminster Green Party?
So I agree with Caroline. As you say, the Scottish Greens and the Green Party of England and Wales are separate parties, so it's a bit like asking the SNP to comment on Plaid Cymru, but Caroline is absolutely right. Anti-Semitism is a problem throughout our society. I've had the privilege of 10 years in Parliament representing about 3/4 of Scotland's Jewish community, so I care really deeply about this. There is no place for anti-Semitism, and we need to root it out. Every political party has a problem with this, and we all need to root it out. At the same time, I think it is deeply cynical that Zach Polanski, the English Greens leader, is the only Jewish party leader in the UK, and he's the one facing so many of these attacks, including from Labour cabinet ministers like Steve Reid, who themselves have had to apologise for actual anti-Semitic remarks that they have made. So we need to be really careful here and root out actual anti-Semitism. There should be no tolerance for that. But we also need to be aware of the deep cynical nature of a lot of these attacks on the Greens in England for the simple reason that they are surging at the moment and Labour are on a downward spiral. The Greens across the UK are about to overtake Labour at these elections. I'm quite confident of that.
Just one last point to make, if I may, and I feel like I can say this because you've joked about it on social media. You and Morgan McSweeney, have you ever been spotted in the same room together? I think we might better show viewers what I'm talking about with an image.
Yeah, Morgan McSweeney is he's my Wario, as young folk would say. I think we are definitely at the opposite ends of politics in so many ways. But yeah, not yet been spotted in the same room. So you know, the rumour mill will continue to circulate on that one.
Thank you very much indeed, co-leader, I should say, of the Scottish Green Party, there speaking to us, Ross Grove.
It's very, very similar look.
I know.
What's quite interesting is he says that we're at the opposite ends of politics, which is a sign of the times that someone from Labour or associated with Labour and the Greens would claim opposite.
Our inbox, I should say, has been absolutely lit up by the airport drinking story that we're going to be doing in the next hour. Views on both sides of the fence. If you've got a view, let us know. mornings@sky.uk. There is one that I did just want to leave you with, though, Wilf, before the end of the hour.
Bring it on.
Frank Stubbs. Could someone inform that deluded presenter that Arsenal haven't got a hope of beating either PSG or Bayern Munich in the Champions League final?
Bring on the underdog. the underdog title will carry it and beat it.
There we go. There we go. I love it. Fighting talk. There you go, Frank. That's the answer to that one. Coming up next, we are going to update you on the cruise ship denied docking at the Canary Islands.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Good morning, it is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Bridge and Frost.
With Sophie Welford, very good morning from me as well. What's ahead?
Breaking news, the Canary Islands rejects a Antivirus-stricken cruise ship from docking there as new images show deserted decks and PPE-clad medical workers aboard.
President Trump pauses the US operation to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz after he says great progress has been made on a deal with Iran.
People who carry out anti-Semitic attacks on behalf of Iran face up to 14 years in jail as the Metropolitan Police announces 100 new officers to protect Jewish communities.
Also ahead, it's the last day before elections in Scotland, Wales and England. We'll have the information you need before you go to the polls.
And good news for Wilf. Bukayo Saka fires Arsenal into the Champions League final for the first time in 20 years.
A very good morning and welcome to the programme. Well, we begin with that breaking news. The cruise ship that's been crippled with the outbreak of Antivirus and had been planned to heading to the Canary Islands to allow some passengers to get off has been banned from docking there. Speaking to local media, the region's leader said there's not sufficient information to guarantee the public safety and has requested an urgent meeting with Spain's Prime Minister.
So just take a look at some of these pictures from on board. You can see the deserted decks, you can see the medical teams who are wearing protective gear. 3 people have died so far and several sick patients who are on board are now being evacuated to Cape Verde before it leaves for urgent medical help.
Let's bring in Sky's Sadia Chowdhury, who can get us up to speed on what had been announced and what we were expecting, which was only yesterday, really, that development, and the fact that it's now not likely to happen.
Yeah, so just a mere few hours ago, the state television in Spain had announced, citing sources from the health ministry, that this ship would be allowed to dock at the Canary Islands on the island of Tenerife. Now the regional leader of Tenerife says that he's opposed to this. Fernando Clivajo was speaking on local radio. And as you say, he says that this decision to allow the docking isn't based on any technical information. He says that the public haven't been given enough reassurances about this, and therefore he's opposed to this decision. He's also requested an urgent meeting with Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez to discuss this issue. Now, this is a really difficult and very complex issue for the cruise company to have to deal with because they presumably don't have the sort of expertise or the equipment on board to deal with an outbreak that actually we don't really know that much about. Just to give you an update on what we know so far, 2 crew members, we understand, who require urgent medical care. That is according to the cruise company. Those 2 crew members were among those who are due to be evacuated on a hospital aircraft to the Canary Islands. And a 3rd person who is linked to a German national who died on board was also due to be evacuated. We know that 2 others, as well as the German national, 2 others have died on board from this. A Dutch couple, one of them is confirmed to have had Antivirus. She was on her way to the Netherlands at an airport in South Africa when she collapsed before she died in hospital. We also know that a British national is in hospital. He is also confirmed to have Antivirus, and it is very unlikely that this cruise ship has the sort of medical expertise to deal with such an outbreak. As I say, we know very little about it, but a South African research body has identified the strain in the 2 people that it says it has tested, that is the British national and the Dutch woman who died. This is a strain, they say, that spreads from human to human. It is very rare, but it is confirmed that at least 2 of those people on that cruise have had that strain.
Sadia, thanks so much for that. And you do just have to pause. I mean, look, obviously thoughts most of all go out with the families of those that have lost their lives, the families of those who are still in a serious condition. But just to be a passenger stuck on that boat, brutal. I mean, it's already been days. It's going to be many days more by the sounds of it. Even if they'd gone to the Canary Islands, it was 3 to 4 days to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just that uncertainty and isolation. I imagine there's great isolation steps on board as well because of stopping the spread. So it's just really, really brutal.
It is also worth pointing out that Antivirus, it's not transmitted in the same way as something like coronavirus, where obviously we always think about the cruise ships where people were quarantined with coronavirus. It's mainly spread through contact with rats or mice, right? It's not necessarily person to person. I think it can happen, but it's much more rare. So it does feel particularly difficult for those people who are stuck on that ship and currently unsure where they're going to be able to get off.
And you can also kind of understand the leader of the Canary Islands saying, well, go somewhere else then. Not wanting to take the responsibility, but not that solves the brutal situation for those on board. Now moving on to the situation in the Middle East, in a surprise move overnight, President Trump announced he's pausing efforts to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, what he'd called Project Freedom, in order to move forward with making a deal with Iran.
So it comes just 3 days after he announced the plan, which would see US vessels guide commercial ships out of the waterway, and also only hours after his own cabinet secretaries actually talked up the mission. President Trump said that great progress had been made on a deal.
On social media, he wrote, based on the request of Pakistan and other countries, the tremendous military success we've had on the campaign against the country of Iran, and additionally the fact that great progress has been made towards a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran, we have mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force and effect, Project Freedom, the movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not the agreement can be finalised and signed.
Well, let's get more now, shall we? Here's our US correspondent, David Blevins in Washington.
This really is an extraordinary decision by President Trump. In his post on Truth Social, he's celebrating America's military success and what he calls the great progress they've made towards a deal with Iran. But make no mistake about it, he's pressing pause on his flagship project to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, on the very day when he urged Iran to throw in the towel.
They should wave, they're very proud. Maybe you won't see a white flag, but essentially that's already what they are. They should wave the white flag of surrender.
And this may have taken Donald Trump's own cabinet by surprise, because it came just hours after two of them, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the man who calls himself Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, both boasted that they had shifted their focus from the war to securing the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, as you know, President Trump has directed U.S. Central Command to restart the free flow of commerce through the Strait of Hormuz under the umbrella of Project Freedom.
The operation is over. Epic Fury, as the president notified Congress, we're done with that stage of it. Okay, we're now on to this Project of Freedom.
That's two cabinet secretaries talking up Project Freedom, which the president is now winding down while he attempts to strike a deal with Iran. No ships in, no ships out, the US blockade firmly in place, and much of the world's oil supply with nowhere to go. So where will this president go next? Can he find a way out of this war that many feel America should never have got involved in?
David Blevins there for us. Let's bring in Sally now, who's live for us in Dubai. I mean, Sally, is this a sign that the attempts to escort Western allied ships out has failed, or is it a sign, more optimistically, that genuine peace talks are happening?
I think it's more an admission that Project Freedom has been a failure, frankly. I mean, it's only lasted 2 days, and in that time, just 2 civilian vessels that we're aware of have been escorted safely through the Strait of Hormuz, despite the immense military might that the US has thrown at this operation. And on top of that, it's represented the biggest threat to this ceasefire collapsing altogether. The UAE has bore the brunt of Iran's retaliation. We've had 2 days of attacks here, now drones and missiles fired at the UAE. Once again yesterday, the Ministry of Defence confirming that. No injuries or damage that we're aware of. But on Monday, they managed to hit a significant oil facility here, as well as one of the UAE's oil tankers. We've also had confirmation from a French shipping group that one of their vessels was targeted yesterday. Some of their crew were injured and the vessel was damaged. Their crew have now been evacuated. Iran have not owned these attacks on the UAE in the last 2 days. Why not? Because if they were to acknowledge publicly that they're behind these renewed attacks on the UAE, it does risk escalation in the same way that the US is not acknowledging that the ceasefire has fallen apart. Neither side seems to want at this stage to admit that this ceasefire is unravelling. They don't seem to want to return to all-out fighting or any sort of escalation. So where does that leave diplomatic efforts? Well, interestingly, the Iranian foreign minister is in Beijing today, meeting his counterpart around a week ahead of Donald Trump's visit to China. Now, China has its economy is extremely exposed to the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. They're the primary buyer of Iranian crude oil, and around half of their oil imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz from Gulf states. Their economy is exposed to the situation that we're seeing unfold here in the Middle East. And they're also potentially now looking to play a more significant role when it comes to mediation and diplomacy ahead of Donald Trump's visit next week. Could that make the difference? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Certainly, ceasefire talks have really stalled, but also Donald Trump's efforts and the US plans so far to try and relieve this situation when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz simply haven't worked. So it really now does look like it's down to diplomatic efforts. We'll just have to wait and see how these visits to Beijing go. And in the meantime, people really are sort of waiting to see how this all unfolds in terms of what it means for the UAE and whether we'll see a third day of attacks here. Could this pause for Project Freedom mean a pause in these renewed attacks on the UAE? The next few hours will prove critical.
Sally, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Now we're going to talk about the rise in anti-Semitic attacks that we've seen recently, because people can now face up to 14 years in prison for attacks on Jewish sites that are carried out, knowingly or unknowingly, on behalf of Iran. The government's planning to include legislation in the King's speech next week, which would allow the Home Secretary to designate proxy groups as a foreign intelligence service.
Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police has announced that 100 police officers will be allocated to a new dedicated community protection team to help protect the Jewish community. Let's bring our correspondent, Graham Stoddard. Graham, tell us what these new announcements are.
Well, they're definitely an effort to prove that words are being met with action. There'd been lots of criticism that wasn't happening, particularly from within the Jewish community in the wake of the spate of anti-Semitic incidents that we've been seeing. If you remember, in the aftermath of the Golders Green incident, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner said that 300 extra officers would be needed to deal with the rise in anti-Semitic crime. So the 100 he's already announced is meant to be the first phase of that, focused primarily on protecting the Jewish community. Police say that they now face significant terrorist and hostile state threats as well. There have been more incidents in recent days. There was a suspected arson attack at a former synagogue. Rocks were thrown at a Jewish community ambulance as well. In the past 4 weeks alone, the Metropolitan Police have made 50 arrests for anti-Semitic crimes, suspected anti-Semitic hate crimes. The Chief Prosecutor for England and Wales, he said the prosecutions need to be sped up. And we now understand, as you mentioned, that the government is planning to announce legislation that could see people face up to 14 years in prison if they've been convicted of anti-Semitic attacks orchestrated from Tehran. Now, the interesting point, which is what you mentioned, is you may do that knowingly or unknowingly. It wouldn't necessarily make a difference, because there are allegations that hostile states are stoking this tide of anti-Semitism, which may be contributing to the recent attacks that we've been seeing. They obviously want to stamp that out, and they want to be seen to be taking firm action on it too.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Now, today is the final day of campaigning before voters head to the polls for the English local council elections and devolved parliamentary elections in Wales and Scotland as well. Lisa McDade is here to break it all down for us. I mean, Lisa, look, we always get excited by local elections if you're kind of into politics like the three of us are, but actually, this time round, it is going to be an absolutely box office set of results.
Yeah, I'm just looking through social media because it's the final day of campaigning today and all of the party leaders are putting their final messages out. And David Lammy, who of course is Deputy Prime Minister, he's just posted and he's put Haringey is on a knife edge. Now, I want to make that point because we're talking here about, London, for example, council seats in London are up. We are talking about places that have been Labour strongholds for decades in some places. And so for a Deputy Prime Minister to come out and say Haringey is on a knife edge, a borough of London, that shows just how challenging they know these are going to be. Usually when politicians come out before local elections, they might, towards the end, admit that, yes, they're going to be challenging. But to kind of be using that language, I think it says just what a moment of peril this is. In Wales, for example, Labour has been in power for more than 100 years, winning elections there for a century. They could lose. They could be virtually wiped out. So it's not an over-exaggeration to say that this is a huge set of elections. As well as that, you've got the devolved nations, I just mentioned there, Scotland and Wales. Pro-independent nationalist parties could sweep through their winning. What does this mean about the future of the UK politics? There are huge things at stake here. We're going to see all of that play out over the next few days.
And we've got a clip from earlier.
I didn't throw into that, did I? That was what I was meant to
No,
do.
I was just trying to check who it is.
It's with...
This is Pam.
And it's interesting, this one, because look, you're talking there about effectively the bloodbath for Labour, right?
Yeah.
And at this time, there's going to be huge pressure on Keir Starmer. And it was quite interesting, wasn't it, to listen to Pat McFadden, who's obviously been going out, and the message he wants to say is, he ain't going anywhere. How's he feeling at the minute? Is he feeling like, like he's going to face down any challenge?
Yes, he is feeling that. He's remarkably resolute, and he knows that to turn inward at this moment or to turn inward after Thursday would be a mistake. The Prime Minister was elected for a 5-year term, and he should serve out that term. I think this country has tested to destruction the idea that the answer to our problems is to swipe left on our Prime Ministers. We've seen too much of that in the past 10 to 15 years. It hasn't solved our problems. It has added to political chaos and uncertainty. That has economic as well as political consequences, and I don't think that's the answer to the situation that we're in at the moment.
Two big takeaways I have from this. The first is that the Prime Minister clearly wants to fight, and it's very, very hard to sort of remove him artificially, though not impossible. The other point I'd just say on the flip side is we've had Pat McFadden and Steve Reid quite a lot recently. So the deep loyalists are probably fewer and far between at the moment than previously. Maybe that's a leap, but it's just quite interesting.
I think it's probably not a coincidence that the final day of campaigning before local elections, Number 10 has chosen to kind of put out on the morning rounds one of their most robust, reliable, loyal cabinet ministers to come out and say that Keir Starmer will fight any leadership challenge. For them to admit that Keir Starmer will fight any leadership challenge is quite something. They're not denying there's a potential challenge there.
I think you're right. You haven't seen Wes Streeting or Ed Miliband recently, have we, for example?
No, you did an interview with him, which I think ruffled a lot of feathers, probably inside Number 10, where he was, potentially not as loyal as Pat McFadden was this morning.
No Angela Rayner. Certainly no Andy Burnham.
No. Seats here if you want to come on.
It's quite a long list, isn't there, of no-shows, which maybe that's telling. Lucy, great stuff. Thank you. I can take a quick break. When we come back, there was a big meeting in Downing Street yesterday where the Prime Minister spoke about trying to tackle anti-Semitism with leaders from all walks of life. We will be speaking to one of the people who was there after the break, the President of the Union of Jewish Students. We'll be right back.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them. It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
To the results
the analysis
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. The Prime Minister has pledged to bring in a zero-tolerance approach to anti-Semitism on university campuses and called for institutions to show how they are doing so to tackle the issue. In a study by the charity Stand With Us, 29% of students said they believe October the 7th attacks by Hamas were an understandable act of resistance. Unbelievable. Among Russell Group University students, that figure rose to 38%. Meanwhile, 38% of students agreed that students who publicly support Israel should expect abuse on campus. Wow. I'm joined now by the president of the Union of Jewish Students, Louis Danker. Louis, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
I was going to start with the fact that you were at this meeting yesterday with the Prime Minister, but I'm really just blown away by those statistics. Has it been that bad for a long time?
I think since October the 7th, 2023, Jewish students have dealt with a rise of anti-Semitism on campus. I mean, it's not just related to Israel. We published a report, the Union of Jewish Students, in March that found that 1 in 5 university students would be reluctant or unwilling to share a house with a Jew, irrespective of their opinions on the conflict. And so this is, you know, not just discourse about Israel and Gaza. This is anti-Semitism, pure and simple.
It must make student life very, very difficult, worse than that, for Jewish students.
It's really challenging. It's really challenging. And I think that there has been a normalisation of anti-Semitism on campus. We see mass underreporting of incidents because for students, this is normality. There was a story I know of students who were walking down the street near campus wearing a kippah, a skull cap on their heads, and someone started yelling at them about the conflict in Gaza and started chasing them down the street, brandishing a glass bottle. So there's physical unsafety as well. But it's important to say we won't be cowed. We won't be cowed into insularity. We're going to still be proud Jews, proud Brits on campus and live out Jewish lives.
What do you put it down to? Is it ignorance? Is it outright evil? How do you kind of try to work it out?
I think it's a little bit of both. But I think ignorance is a real problem. Jews are less than 0.5% of the population. Lots of people go onto campus having never met a Jewish person, and they come into an incredibly intense environment of protest and activism. And I think, you know, one of the conversations we were having yesterday at this summit was about the need for education on anti-Semitism and on Jews in school, not at university, but earlier, primary schools, secondary schools. What is the Jewish community in this country? How are they a proud part of multicultural Britain? Because there's so much ignorance in young people.
So tell me about this meeting yesterday with the Prime Minister. What was your message to him, and do you think he heard it?
I think so. I mean, to be honest, my message was really to the civil society leaders in the room. I think the big question that's been nagging at me for the past few weeks is, where is the outrage? Where has anti-racist civil society gone? There has been a stunning silence in the past few weeks from so many groups that you would expect to be standing with the minority community under attack in Britain. And so my message to them was, there's been enough institutional timidity. It's time for real bravery in standing with the Jewish community.
Do you get a sense, far too late, unacceptable as it is, that people are changing their tune in the last week or not? I mean, again, as I say, far too late, unacceptable as it is there a shift? The very fact that you were in Downing Street yesterday?
I think so. I think yesterday's meeting was the right one. I think bringing those leaders together is crucial. We need a whole society approach. And there have been some really good announcements overnight already in terms of policy changes in the education space, in the culture space, policing, the CPS. So I think there's been a step change, but we need to see that continuing. Yesterday can't just be a flash in the pan.
And do you think these changing messages are filtering through, I'm sure it's too early to tell, but filtering through to younger people, to campuses? Take me back to that balance of, I guess you're alluding to in one of your earlier answers, the sort of peer pressure aspect that dominates.
Yeah, I think that my generation are echo chamber natives, right? We grow up on social media, we live our lives through Instagram and TikTok, and so it's so easy to lose nuance in debate. But actually, we need to learn to live with difference. We're a multicultural society. There are so many different opinions and perspectives, and that needs to be able to be shared without resorting to violence or threat or assault or abuse, as those statistics at the start outlined.
You mentioned the scale of kind of, I guess at times even threats of physical violence, but of kind of discrimination that Jewish students have faced on the campus. As the president of the Union of Jewish Students, you must personally have faced even more than the average Jewish student. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I think that every time we were to post something on social media, there is a torrent in the replies. And I think that, you know, I spoke at Downing Street yesterday and spoke about the rise in anti-Semitism and posted the video. And underneath in the replies, you know, expletives, conversation about the conflict in Gaza, which my speech had nothing to do with. And that's the sort of whataboutery that we always have to deal with. When Jews cry anti-Semitism, we're asked, well, why haven't you condemned this? Why haven't you done that? But actually, we're facing discrimination as British Jews and just for being Jewish. Well, I mean, well done you for standing up in the face of this as a young man in particular. It's brave and it's making a difference, as I think you're alluding to from the meeting yesterday. And we thank you very much for joining us, but most of all for the work you do. Thank you. Louis Danker, the president of the Union of Jewish Students. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to the chair of the UK's Birth Trauma Inquiry. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. An update on the fact, of course, that President Trump has paused his Operation Freedom, which had attempted to escort Western allied ships out of the Strait of Hormuz. He's paused it because of hopes that peace talks can begin and get somewhere. Well, a short time ago, Pakistan's Prime Minister posted this message on X. He says, "I'm grateful to President Trump for his courageous leadership and timely announcement regarding the pause of Project Freedom in the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump's gracious response to the request made by Pakistan and other brotherly countries, particularly the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and my dear brother, Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, HRH Prince Mohammed bin Salman, will go a long way towards advancing regional peace, stability and reconciliation during this sensitive period. Pakistan remains firmly committed to supporting all efforts to promote restraint and a peaceful resolution of conflicts through dialogue and diplomacy. We are very hopeful that the current momentum will lead to a lasting agreement that secures durable peace and stability for the region and beyond." Of course, we now wait to see whether peace talks do materialise in any successful way or not. Oil prices down about 3% today to $107 a barrel on Brent.
We're going to return to our coverage of the elections taking place tomorrow, local elections in England, but parliamentary elections in Scotland and Wales. So it couldn't be more important. Millions of people are going to be having their say. And we can continue our series of interviews with party leaders in Scotland. We can talk to the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, that is Alex Cole-Hamilton. Thank you very much for being with us today. So,
morning, Toby.
Worth pointing out that, these elections to the Scottish Parliament only happen every, 5 years. Massive day in Scotland tomorrow. What is your final pitch to voters?
Well, it's absolutely huge. And Lib Dems have had a lovely campaign. We've really enjoyed it because we've been getting a great response from the voters. And we've got a positive vision for change with fairness at its heart after 19 years of SNP government failure. We've got a solution to fix the crisis in our NHS by driving down the problems in social care, lifting up Scottish education by taking mobile phones out of classrooms and putting pupil support assistance in, getting Scotland moving again, fixing our roads, fixing our ferries, and driving down the cost of living, insulating cold Scottish homes. And we can win in seats across Scotland, whether that's the West Coast, the Highlands, Eastern Barnshire, Edinburgh, Fife. We've got the beating of the SNP. But wherever you are, a vote for the Lib Dems on that second peach-coloured vote. Remember, we've got 2 votes cast in this election. That second peach-coloured vote will elect a Lib Dem MSP who'll be a local champion for everyone in Scotland.
If you're looking at the kind of polls and the projections, it feels like there could very well be, a pro-independence majority in Scotland if the Scottish Greens and the SNP team up. If that happens, do you think that there should be another referendum on independence, or do you agree with the UK government position that even if the Scottish Parliament wants another independence referendum, they shouldn't be able to have one?
No, I don't think there should be one. And for why? We're barely 10 years since the last time the Scottish people went to the polls on this. They resoundingly rejected independence, yet for the intervening period, this has been the sum total of public debate in Scotland. It's one of the reasons we have 2,000 Scots stuck in hospital on any given night, well enough to go home, but too frail to do so because there's no social care in their communities to receive them home. It's why educational attainment standards are slipping. Child poverty remains high because ministerial disinterest in the day job has held Scotland back. For all of the problems that currently face Scotland, the answer to none of them is a third decade of SNP power. We need change, and it needs to be changed with fairness at its heart.
Just coming, because you're saying that voters kind of rejected the idea of independence, but I guess the issue is if a majority vote for the Scottish Greens, the SNP, I mean, they're not hiding the fact that they're pro-independence, they're shouting about it, then doesn't that mean that actually there is a mandate for a second referendum?
But the majority of voters won't have elected these parties because at the moment the SNP are at or around 35% of the polls, yet they could get the vast majority of seats. That's just the nature of the system. Shows it's a broken system, actually, in terms of our election. I think everybody's got a view on independence. There's no question. And it sort of hovers around 50-50. But the salience of that for people has really dropped away. It doesn't motivate your vote. And people aren't voting in this election about whether they want a divisive second referendum. I knock more doors than any other party leader. And I can tell you, number one issue is cost of living. Second issue is access access to local healthcare, or the 800,000 Scots currently waiting for some kind of medical treatment, all being held up by inaction by the SNP government. People want change. They're done with this 19 years of tired SNP power. If the SNP do win the election tomorrow, and I think that's not a foregone conclusion, I think big surprises are in store, like in our 10 target constituencies and big surges for the Lib Dems on that second peach-coloured vote. And I think, if they do win, it will have been because they'd won narrowly in constituencies, but are holding on to power with just the support of 35% of the public.
You describe them as tired. If they do win but not get over the line for a majority, would the Scottish Lib Dems be prepared to work with an SNP-led government? Would you even consider a formal coalition?
Well, we certainly wouldn't consider a formal coalition. I would resign as leader of the Lib Dems before voting to put John Swinney back in Bute House as First Minister. But if he can make it over the line and establish a government, we've shown in the previous Parliament the Lib Dems are grown-ups. We exist to get things done. We don't just fire off angry press releases. We negotiated, dragged concessions out with the SNP in the last Parliament for 2 budgets, where we got hundreds of millions of pounds behind Lib Dem commitments, £178 million in business rate relief, £70 million for Scotland's colleges, action on neurodiversity waiting times. None of that would have happened without the Lib Dems. So if he does establish a government, and we'll recognise we'll respect the outcome of the election, and we'll take issues on a case-by-case, budget-by-budget basis. I think that's what the public of Scotland would want from their political leaders. But I do think that talk of an SNP returning to power is premature. I think there is still hope that we can exact a change, and change with fairness at its heart. And Lib Dems, my goodness, we are going to take a massive leap forward at this election.
Thank you very much indeed. Good to have you on the programme today.
Great to be here.
Now, we've been talking an awful lot about maternity services in the UK on this programme, and our next guest is somebody who, I have to say, has been absolutely pioneering, I would say, in talking openly about her experience of giving birth, and really, I think, firing up the debate in Westminster, I think it's fair to say.
Certainly true, the case for that. Well, the latest official data that we've got says that there were 252 maternal deaths from 2022 to 2024. That's 20% higher than the rates from 2009 to 2011. We're joined now by the chair of the UK's Birth Trauma Inquiry, Theo Clark. A very good morning to you, and thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
I guess the first question is your reaction to that data, which we got recently, and the fact that it's still so stark.
Well, firstly, it's incredibly shocking. I mean, we are a developed country, and to see those statistics, I think, should make the government take very urgent action to improve maternity safety. And unfortunately, we have seen a huge number of reports in the last few years which say that there is an increasing concern about maternity care across the country. I chaired a cross-party national inquiry in Parliament 2 years ago, and what we found as our headline recommendation was that there was, in fact, a postcode lottery in effect across the UK. So depending on where you currently give birth in this country, you will actually receive a different level of maternity care. And I thought that was wrong, and we called on the government previously to do something to address it. And to be honest, that's why I'm still here, Sophie, talking about this 2 years later, because, how many more shocking statistics like that do we need for the government to take very urgent action to improve maternity care? And we want women to feel safe in this country. And unfortunately, based on the huge number of stories I receive every week from families with really shocking stories of poor care, I don't think that's currently the case.
Just to say, I'm so glad to have you on the programme. I've been following your work in this area for a few years now, and I think it's the first time I've actually properly kind of spoken to you about it. So I guess I just want to say thank you for being so open in sharing your own story and working in I think a genuinely cross-party way, it's fair to say, to try and make some change on such an important issue. Feel free to talk as much as you want or much as you don't want about your own experience, but this is a personal battle for you as well, I guess.
Well, yes, and I'm very happy to share my story. I think it's fair to say that if you told me 2 years ago I'd be most well known for talking about birth trauma, I certainly was not expecting that when I was a former MP. But I had my baby in the previous Parliament and unfortunately had a really traumatic birth. And I think I had really no expectations in kind of pregnancy or during antenatal classes of things that could go wrong and risks in childbirth. And I ended up having a postpartum hemorrhage and losing a lot of blood after birth. And I discovered I'd had a very significant birth injury known as a third-degree tear. And what meant after the birth happened was that instead of having that kind of gold now, my daughter and breastfeeding, I actually got rushed into emergency surgery. And I was lying awake on the operating table for over 2 hours, basically thinking I was going to die and my husband was going to be a single dad. And then when I came out of that experience, which was, as I'm sure you can appreciate, the most terrifying experience of my life, I remember being in the side ward with my baby screaming in the cot next to me, who I couldn't pick up. And this NHS professional came in when I pressed the buzzer and said, "Not my baby, not my problem," and just walked out and left me there.
That's what they said to you?
Yeah, when I was at the most vulnerable time and actually couldn't move, having just come out of surgery. And really it was that experience and then the very long recovery time that I had for my physical and mental health post the birth that led me on this long campaign to start campaigning for other mums, because I did have a platform as then a politician. And I find it really concerning that I'm still here 2 years later asking the government to adopt the recommendations of our report, because it's frankly concerning that a number of these things have not been improved in the time since I had my own baby.
Do you think, are you sort of suggesting there didn't need to be a further inquiry, a further report?
So obviously at the moment we have Baroness Amos doing her current investigation into maternity. My personal view was that was the government kicking the can down the road. There were so many reports done by previous inquiries, like my own, where they could have taken that report off the shelf, easily implemented our recommendations. And one of our headline findings was to have really a dedicated person in charge who could be independent, making the case for maternity in Westminster. And that's why I called in that report, which was a cross-party parliamentary inquiry for a maternity commissioner. And that's why I'm still calling for it now. And that's why I launched this petition earlier in the year with Louise Thompson. We've had over 157,000 of the public who've signed the petition. So I think it's very clear that the scale of public opinion is with us. And I think the public wants to see the government to take action. And we don't need another listening exercise. We actually already know what the problems in maternity care are. And now it's about the government delivering and actually taking action.
You mentioned your work with Louise Thompson. I think we can show an image of you guys from last Tuesday. Louise Thompson, the former Made in Chelsea star, also been very open about her own traumatic birth experience with Wes Streeting. Do you trust the guy in that photo, Wes Streeting? Do you think he actually does really want to deliver on this?
Well, firstly, we obviously welcome that the Health Secretary took the time to meet with myself and Louise in person last week to discuss our petition. My biggest concern, which is why we need the Commissioner, is that will Wes Streeting still be in the job to implement any of the findings from the maternity investigation? And with all due respect, Sophie, I'm on my 8th Health Secretary, and we have so many government reshuffles. Who knows what will happen after local elections? That the point of having the maternity commissioner is to have that dedicated, independent person whose job it is every day to fight for mums. But what was enthusiastic about the meeting was that Wes Streeting did say that he was very interested to and open to the idea of appointing a commissioner. And I think if Baroness Amos was to include it in her recommendations, I think it would be very likely that he would accept her findings in June. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think if the public keep writing into him to say this is an important appointment, I think the government is seriously considering now making this appointment.
We talked about those statistics at the start and how unacceptable that is for a country like the UK. You said you're enthusiastic to a degree. Are you enthusiastic that the numbers will only get better from here?
Well, I think this is the central problem, is that the numbers are getting worse. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've now seen reports of, the CQC downgrading maternity units. I mean, the number of hospitals now which requires improvement or inadequate maternity provision has been increasing, which is also very concerning. And if you look at the number of investigations, like Donna Rockenden with her investigation into Nottingham, which will report next month, and now all these new inquiries into Sussex and into Leeds. And I think this is back to my point about the central investigation in maternity needing to have a person whose job it is every day to fight for mums like Louise and myself, is that those are all individual localised investigations into maternity. And it's almost like we're not learning the lessons of what's best and worst practice in different parts of the country. So we've got to end the postcode lottery in maternity care. And I think the government needs to invest properly in women's health and make sure there's more frontline services and staff on the wards.
I mean, it is unbelievable. Like, more women dying in childbirth today, 2026. I still can't really fathom that this could be the case, but it's been great to talk to you, and we'd love to have you on throughout the process. I know you're not going to let this one lie, so it's been great to talk to you. Thank you, dear.
Dear Clark. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about the battle between Elon Musk and Sam Altman for OpenAI. We'll be right back.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's international affairs editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country. It's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote
on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now? What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Got a little bit of breaking news to bring you, and it is relating to the Antivirus outbreak on the cruise ship that you can see in your picture there. We are just hearing that another person with Antivirus infection is currently being treated at the University Hospital in Zurich in Switzerland. Now, they were on the ship. This person is a male passenger. They were on the cruise ship. They then returned to Switzerland, noticed symptoms, telephoned their GP, and after going to hospital, they have confirmed a positive case of Antivirus. He returned from a trip to South America with his wife at the end of April. She is testing negative, not showing any symptoms, but she's self-isolating as a precaution. So another case, another positive case of Antivirus related to the cruise ship now off the coast of Cape Verde.
They do say in this release that person-to-person transmission of the type of Antivirus that this person has in Switzerland is rare and only is transmitted through very close contact. Therefore, they consider the occurrence of further cases in Switzerland unlikely, and that the risk to public in Switzerland is low.
And just to update you on the latest movements of the cruise ship, they're currently off the coast of Cape Verde. Passengers who are unwell are expected to be taken away from that boat to Cape Verde where they can get medical attention. The other passengers were planning to disembark in the Canary Islands. However, the leader of the Canary Islands has said that they're refusing to allow them to do that, so it is currently unclear as to when the other people are going to be able to get off that boat.
Now, the battle for the future of OpenAI wages on in court in the US as two of the biggest names in the AI race go head-to-head. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, owner of social media platform X and chief executive of the car company Tesla, is taking on Sam Altman, the head of the world's best-known artificial intelligence company OpenAI. Well, earlier we spoke to the tech journalist Kara Swisher, she doubted the tech companies would adhere to self-regulation as the industry evolves.
They do everything for shareholder value. I mean, the first line of my book many years ago, which everyone thought at the time was too mean, it turns out it's not mean enough, was it was capitalism after all. They're interested in shareholder value, and that's it. They do not have any interest in the community or anything else. And so we shouldn't force them to force them to do it themselves, because they won't. They just won't. And so we have legislators who are elected by the people, and they should have stepped in, and they haven't done. I mean, there are no rules governing tech companies in the United States, zero. After all this time, no privacy rules, no algorithmic transparency rules. And so what's really interesting is that there's a real movement from the people who are sick and tired of this effect on their kids, the worries about AI, the lack of government accountability here. And so it's forcing people into more drastic solutions probably wouldn't have been had we had good guardrails in place.
Interesting, specifically on the Altman versus Musk battle for OpenAI, she did think that Altman would win that. Quite confident, she sounded, of that. But even if it's been a court case, it's been quite embarrassing for sort of all parties as, in the various discovery stages. On the clip that we just played there, speaking about social media as well, and suggesting that the tide is turning, and in light of the UK potentially moving in the direction of a social media ban for under 16s, but also on the very topic of AI itself. I thought it was very interesting for such a pro-tech journalists to talk about how AI itself is kind of actually quite unpopular with people in a way that social media wasn't this early in its stage of development.
It's almost people, I think, have just slightly more switched on to the dangers of it, I guess, and want a few more guardrails in place, even if they, like you say, kind of embrace the tech in itself. Now, we've been inundated, I have to say, with emails and correspondence from you guys about Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary's calls for airports to limit how much alcohol they give to passengers. He said that there should be a 2-point limit. Maybe people don't need to drink at all at 6 a.m. And I have to say, people are pretty split. I just want to bring you a couple of the emails that we've had. We've got Ross Hortons, who said, as someone who potentially has to deal with the issues associated with airport drinking, there's no reason to be serving alcohol so early, no excuse. Peter Warwick also agrees with him. There's no reason to be drinking alcohol at that time. Why do we do that at the airport? We wouldn't do that in the normal day. On the flip side of the argument, Gavin Johnson is always the few that ruin it for the rest. He reckons that if we breathalyse people at the gate, if they look like they're over the limit, don't let them board, problem solved. And Peter Gordon, which I think is probably my take, I have to say. As ever, drinking in moderation should be observed, but a cheeky beer at an unusual hour at the start of an exciting holiday really gets the trip going. It's special because you're in holiday mode. It's the only situation when you consider having a drink at that time of day.
It does taste better.
I think
when you're en route to holiday. The thing I'd say on this is, as we sort of the gist of it, it's unfair to tar everyone with the same brush, and some people obviously ruin it for others. That said, on the flip side, we have a very odd starting point on this, which is 24-hour drinking licences in airports. And I think if, it's so hard to sort of reverse something when the cat's already out of the bag. If the starting point was, rather than midday onwards, which would be what it would be for a restaurant or whatever, it's 10 a.m. onwards, and it's not allowed to drink from midnight through to 9 a.m., I don't think you'd ever see anyone campaign to say, well, that's outrageous. I want a beer at 6 a.m. So there is definitely a gap there where you could have a sort of small tightening of things, which is sort of fairly sensible. But if it comes under the guise of, well, there's a few people ruining it for the rest, it is a bit unfair on those that are observing the rules fairly. By the way, I don't think they should breathalyse you on a plane. I think you should be able to have more than the drink drive limit.
Yeah,
on
that's
a nice
fair,
8-hour flight to somewhere hot.
On the timing, though, it's always 12 o'clock somewhere.
Exactly. Well, that's true. That's true. Maybe that's the way around it.
Just to say, we, of course, don't agree with people getting excessively drunk on planes and ruining it for everybody else. But, pint a beer at the airport.
Yeah.
Start the holiday.
Do drink responsibly. Gosh, have a lovely holiday if you've got one coming up.
Yeah, if you get the flight.
Get a flight, yeah.
Coming up, we are going to be updating you on the latest on that cruise ship. Another confirmed case of Antivirus. And it's not clear at all, of course, where or when these passengers will be able to get off. Gareth is up next with the latest on that.
And the very latest on the situation in the Middle East. Don't go anywhere.